Estimated reading time, 15 minutes. The Nevada heat rippled off the asphalt, distorting the long, empty road ahead. I wiped sweat from my brow and adjusted the camera strap around my neck. Squinting at the horizon, no sign of the fox. No sign of anything. Really, I should have been writing a real story, something that actually mattered. But instead, I was here, in the middle of nowhere, chasing a local legend about a rare albino desert kit fox that probably didn't even exist. This is what my career had come to. I can imagine the lackluster headline already. Kinley, local journalist takes photo of a white fox. How exhilarating. Advertisements. I'm a small town journalist. I'm barely scraping by. A handful of articles on local events. A few dry interviews with our mayor. And nothing that anyone outside my town would ever care about. There was no money in it. No future. If I had the funds, I'd have taken the risk and moved to the city by now, where stories actually happened. But I wasn't just stuck here, I was needed here. My mother had been slipping away for the last 7 years, and I was the only one left to take care of her. My only sibling, my half-brother, was gone, buried under 6 feet of dirt after he took his own life in 2019. He never recovered after his 5-year-old son Jackson died from some rare blood disorder. He tried all sorts of strange treatment options. Never divulged the details, but I know he tried every method possible. The doctors called it an anomaly. Just one of those things. I called it a goddamn nightmare. Rent was due next week. My savings were a joke. If I didn't land something soon, I was screwed. A viral photo of the elusive white fox wouldn't change my life, but it might buy me a little more time. Advertisements. Then I saw her. A lone figure in the distance, walking straight down the middle of the road. No car, no supplies, nothing but a slow, dragging gait in the sweltering heat pressing down on her shoulders. I frowned. The nearest town was 30 miles away. She shouldn't have been here. As she neared, I got my first clear look at her, a woman in her 70s. Maybe older. Her clothes were stained with dust and sweat. Her arms thin and sinewy. Her skin burnt and peeling like old parchment. Her hair clung to her forehead, dark with sweat, and something about her felt wrong. My eyes landed on a faded panda tattoo on her arm. It was amateur work, the lines shaky, uneven. I grabbed my canteen and jogged toward her, holding it out. Hey, take this. You need water. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She stared past me, through me, like I wasn't even there. Ma'am? No reaction. Her breathing was off, a rattling, phlegmy sound that made my stomach tighten. I reached out carefully, placing a hand on her shoulder. Hey, seriously, let me take you to a hospital. Or at least, let me get you back home. That's when she stopped. Not gradually, not naturally, just stopped, like a malfunctioning doll that had suddenly lost power. The silence between us stretched. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths, her skin slick with sweat and dust. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my stomach drop. They weren't just tired. They were vacant, stretched wide in confusion, in fear, like she was just realizing she was here. And then she whispered it. The kids. A chill scraped down my spine. There are no kids. The words barely made it past her lips, as if she was afraid to say them. Where are they? Her voice trembled. Her breathing hitched. Her gaze flickered wildly, as if she were scanning the desert for something, as if she expected to see them. I swallowed hard. What kids? I don't. Her body jerked forward as if something snapped inside her. She grabbed my wrist, her fingers like claws digging into my skin. Where's my baby? She was gasping now, panic gripping her entire body. Her legs shook beneath her, and suddenly she was fighting for air, like a fish thrown onto the shore. The kids, they're gone, all of them. Her voice splintered into raw hysteria. Her body convulsed, chest rising and falling too fast. Her fingers tightening until my skin burned. Ashbrook, she wheezed out, eyes wild and unfocused. There are no kids in Ashbrook. All of them, gone. Then she collapsed. I barely caught her before she hit the ground. She was still breathing, but it was shallow, labored, like something inside her was breaking. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I knew one thing. I had to get her help. I dragged her toward the jeep, my heart slamming against my ribs. Ashbrook, A town I'd never stepped foot in. A town 30 miles further down this empty road. I raced for what felt like hours, but really was only 20-odd minutes. A rundown sign finally catches my attention. Welcome to Ashbrook. It didn't take long to find what looked to be a hospital. I whipped the Jeep into the parking lot, slammed it in park, and bolted for the front door. Hello? Someone help, please. A man in a white coat ran past me and out the front door without even acknowledging my presence. I followed the dark-haired doctor as he rushed outside, pushing a wheelchair toward my Jeep. The elderly woman was slumped in the seat, her breaths short and shallow. I expected him to ask me questions, where I found her, what happened, but he didn't. His face was unreadable. You know her? I asked. The doctor didn't look up. We all know Marley. His voice was stiff, like he wasn't supposed to say more. Inside, the hospital felt off. It wasn't the usual sterile, overlit nightmare of hospitals. The walls were a sickly beige. The waiting room nearly silent. A single nurse sat behind the counter, barely acknowledging me. The place was almost empty. No kids, no families, just a handful of elderly patients, staring at the walls like they were waiting for something. I sat in the lobby for an hour before a nurse approached me. Her smile felt forced. She'll be fine, she said. You can leave now. Something about it didn't sit right. Can I see her? The nurse hesitated, then shook her head. She's resting. Liar. I don't know what it is. But the delivery from the nurse gave it all away. I stepped outside, the heat slamming into me like a wall. I needed air. I needed space. But most of all, I needed to get the hell out of that hospital. Something about the place, about the way they treated Marley like an afterthought. The way the nurse brushed me off felt wrong. I leaned against the Jeep, rubbing my temples. I could just leave, drive home, pretend none of this happened. But the words wouldn't leave me. There are no kids in Ashbrook. Marley wasn't just confused, she was afraid. And now that I was here, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't wrong. I scanned the street in front of me. Ashbrook was small, unsettlingly quiet. A handful of businesses lined the street, nothing modern, nothing corporate, just mom and pop shops that looked like they hadn't been updated in decades. A thrift store, a butcher shop, a place called Ashbrook Treasures, with sun-faded knickknacks in the window. It wasn't what I expected. For a town with no children, no young families, Ashbrook was alive. People milled about, moving between stores, chatting outside the diner. It was as if the town was perfectly content in its own isolated world. I grabbed my camera and notebook from the passenger seat. If there were no kids here, someone had to notice. Someone had to care. I decided to start small. The first shop I saw was an arts and crafts store, rundown, but still open. Maybe I could ease into it, chat up the owner, get a feel for the people here before pushing too hard. I pulled open the door, the small brass bell jingling overhead. The smell of dried wood, old paper, and something vaguely floral filled the air. Shelves of handmade trinkets lined the walls, woven baskets, carved figurines, hand-painted signs with phrases like, "Bless this home," and "Welcome, friends." No sign of a cashier. I hesitated, glancing around. "Hello? Are you open?" A few seconds passed before a woman emerged from a supply closet in the back, sporting a tie-dye shirt and pink shorts. She smiled easily, her movements quick and eager, like someone who wasn't used to getting many customers. "Well, howdy there. Not very often we get an outsider. Look around. Everything is negotiable. Let me know if you need any help at all." Her energy was a stark contrast to the cold, distant reception I got at the hospital. I returned her smile, slipping into journalist mode. If I wanted answers, I needed to blend in. Be friendly, be honest, be curious, but not suspicious. I ran my fingers over a small, hand-carved wooden owl sitting on the counter. "Actually, I'm a journalist. I wanted to talk to some locals to see if they had any interesting stories to share about life in Ashbrook." The woman's eyes flickered upward, as if considering something. "Well, there's not much that goes on in this town," she said finally. "Sometimes we get some drunkards who make fools of themselves for our entertainment. But that's about as exciting as it gets around here." I let out a short laugh. She was lying. I could feel it. I decided to shift gears. "You know, I came to town because an elderly woman collapsed in front of me about 30 miles out from Ashbrook. I hope she's okay. Do you happen to know her? She was about my height. A bit thinner. Had a panda tattoo on her arm. The shift in her expression was immediate. A flicker of something, concern? Fear? Recognition? Crossed her face before she covered it with a quick, practiced smile. Marley? Oh dear Lord. That poor woman. The shopkeeper wrung her hands together, forcing a tight-lipped smile. She's been having a rough go of it lately. Something about the way she said it made my stomach numb. What do you mean? I asked. She hesitated, glancing at the front door like she was checking for someone. She's just not well. The same vague response I got at the hospital. She said something strange before she passed out. I pressed. Kept talking about kids. Said there were no kids in Ashbrook. The shopkeeper's smile faltered. It was quick. Just a flicker, but I caught it. The tightening of her lips. The way her fingers twitched against the counter. She's confused, she said, too quickly. Been saying strange things for a while now. I pretended to scribble something in my notebook. So what exactly happened to those kids again? Why'd they leave? I forget. I was bluffing. I had absolutely no information other than what some crazy, exhausted lady said before she'd passed out. Her hands stilled against the countertop. They never left. Just gotta pass their trials. The words left her lips softly, like a reflex. Something she'd said 1,000 times before. My stomach twisted. What trials? The shopkeeper's eyes snapped up, like she just realized what she said. She forced another smile. Too wide. Too strained. Oh, you know, just an old saying. Anyway, like I said, pick anything you like. 40% discount for the outsider. She turned and grabbed something from a nearby shelf, a handmade doll. It was disturbingly realistic. The fingers too small. The glass eyes too bright. A gift, the shopkeeper had said. It didn't feel like one. My son made this one a long time ago. But I'd like you to have it. I turned it from side to side, bouncing its limbs as if I was appreciating the craftsmanship. There was a bit of some kind of dark sludge seeping through the collar of the doll's small shirt. Someone must have been playing with it outside recently. It sure smelled like it. I crinkled my nose and pulled back slightly to avoid the odor. I wiped the grime off the doll with my shirt sleeve, and shoved it into my bag, pushing away the unease curling in my stomach. As I was zipping it back up, I heard something that caught my attention. Across the street, a group of 3 men stood outside a small, government-looking building, something between a courthouse and a town hall. They spoke in low, hushed voices, heads close together. Their conversation was clipped, urgent. I waved goodbye to the shopkeeper, hurriedly leaving to get a closer listen to the 3 men. I slowed my pace, pretending to check my camera settings as I passed by. We'll take him down tonight. You sure they're ready? Council already approved it. We go down after dark. A sharp silence followed. I looked up. They were staring at me. All 3 of them, still, silent, their expressions blank. My pulse kicked up. I forced a casual smile, tapping my camera. Cool old building, I said, gesturing toward the town hall. History buffs love this stuff. Advertisements. They didn't respond, just kept watching. The moment stretched too long, like they were waiting to see if I'd keep talking. I cleared my throat and turned, walking away. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I needed a break, just for a moment, something to ground me. It had been a mentally exhausting day. The neon glow of a diner sign flickered ahead. Ashbrook Diner. Simple, welcoming. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Checkered floors, red leather booths, the faint sound of an old radio crackling in the corner. A handful of locals sat at the counter, their conversations quiet. A waitress, middle-aged, kind smile, approached me. Haven't seen you before, sweetheart. What can I get ya? I wasn't in the mood for anything extravagant. Just a burger and fries. Medium well. She hesitated for a second. Just a second. Then she smiled again, coming right up. It arrived quickly. I was impressed. It's like they had it ready to go before I'd even walked in. The smell was intoxicating, rich, perfectly seasoned, almost unreal. I took a bite. It was absolutely delicious. Better than any burger I'd ever had. The juices melted in my mouth. The meat soft and tender. I devoured half of it before I even realized swallowed the first bite. I finished my meal, thanked the waitress, and left. I felt full, satisfied, almost comforted. That feeling wouldn't last. Hours passed. It was now nighttime. A full moon, not a cloud in the sky. It was beautiful. I wanted to take it all in and enjoy it. But I had work to do. The veil of night was draping the town in a heavy silence. The full moon cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, painting the town hall in streaks of silver and black. I stood across the street, partially hidden behind an old newspaper dispenser, watching. The building loomed in front of me, ordinary and unassuming. But I knew better. Something was off. I had seen the men walk by and disappear behind the building. I heard echoes of their hushed words play again in my head. "We'll take him down tonight." I checked my surroundings. The streets were empty. No late-night wanderers. No passing cars. Even the diner, which had been warm and buzzing just hours ago, was dark. I moved quickly, crossing the street with light steps. My heart hammered against my ribs as I neared the side entrance of the town hall, a set of thick wooden doors, latched shut with a heavy padlock. Not the way in. I slipped around to the back of the building. And there they were, large cellar doors, steel, old, slightly ajar. I took a slow breath, steadying my nerves, and pulled the doors open. The hinges whined softly, echoing in the still night. A staircase spiraled downward, swallowed in darkness. The air changed immediately, dense and humid, thick with the scent of damp earth and something rotten. I hesitated. Then, I pulled out my phone's flashlight, clicked it on, and stepped inside. The doors creaked shut behind me. The stone walls dripped with moisture as I crept deeper. The staircase ended in a long, low-ceilinged corridor. The air thick and still. Dim, flickering lights lined the walls, casting the space in a sickly yellow glow. Then I heard something that caught my attention. A low mechanical groan. The sound of something large moving up towards the ground floor. I pressed forward, heart in my throat. The hallway opened up into an enormous cavern. And what I saw was something I'd never have imagined, even in the worst horror movies I'd seen. It was like some sort of twisted underground factory. Dozens of sickly, gray-skinned children worked in eerie silence. Their small, frail bodies covered in grime. Their fingers raw and blackened. They had no color to their skin. They looked like corpses. Some worked at old, rusted machines, sculpting tools with their hands moving mechanically, like they had done this forever. Not tools made from steel. They were made of mud, filth, the kind of grime you'd find at the bottom of a wet pile of trash in a landfill. Just thick enough to keep its sculpted form. Some kids packaged the filth with their fingers, pressing the dark, wet material into molds, wrapping it, placing it into various containers. Containers that were identical to ones I had seen in the town's shop windows. Most disturbingly to me was the food. Children combining different piles of that black, disgusting goop together to make recognizable dishes. A sandwich dripping with putrid-smelling slime. A container of mud-coated French fries. Some maggot-filled material being crafted into the shape of eggs, where they were gently placed into a carton. I couldn't help but gag. Others simply stared ahead, blanky-eyed, as if nothing existed beyond this place. My shock had kept me from noticing where that noise was coming from. A massive industrial lift groaned in the center of the cavern. Crates of filth loaded onto its platform, through the gap in the ceiling where the lift came down from. I saw them, townspeople waiting above, receiving the crates, stacking them into storage. Food, tools, clothing, baby dolls not dissimilar from the gift I'd received earlier. Everything Ashbrook needed, made from filth, by the children of filth. My stomach turned. I could see the varying levels of product progression on a table in the storage room above. 3 different stacks of soda cans sitting on a table. The stack on the left still fully black, dripping goo, freshly made, it seemed. The middle stack was still covered in grime, but I could make out faint letters taking form on it. The third and final stack looked to be normal Pepsi that you'd buy at the store. What was this? Before I could even process any of what I'd seen, the heavy slam of a door echoed through the cavern. I ducked behind a crate, heart racing. The councilman entered, dragging a small body bag toward a slab of concrete. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Something moved inside the bag. A soft, muffled whimper. They unzipped it slowly. I caught a glimpse of a young, Sickly child, his limbs frail, his face half hidden by shadows. 5 or 6 years old. If I had to guess, he was still alive. I pressed my back harder against the crate, breath shallow, trying to steady myself. The councilmen were still talking, their voices bouncing off the cavern walls, echoing into the foul air. He should be fine through the first phase. Right? Maybe. They all get sick. You know that. It's just the way Ashbrook is. A sharp silence. Then, a sigh. The man continued, as always, if he survives the trials, we'll send him back up. He'll be old enough to help around town. If not, he can join the rest of them. Now, can you go ahead and tell the doctor that he's ready for his trials? Sure thing. The other man in the shadows replied. I don't envy this kid at all. He's either going to die, or he'll wish he was dead every day for the next decade. I know I did. A realization hit me like ice water down my spine. Every child in Ashbrook got sick. Not just the ones I was looking at now. Every single child. And the only way to survive was through this. Through this place. Through the trials. Whatever they may be. Through whatever horrors they put them through. If they made it to adulthood, they could go back, live among the others, like nothing ever happened. But if they failed, I swallowed thickly, my gaze darting back to the children at the stations. Their rotting skin, their lifeless eyes, then back to the new child barely breathing in the body bag. They didn't survive. Advertisements they stayed here, underground, in some limbo between life and death, made to work and craft from filth that which the town needed. I clenched my eyes shut. After a few minutes, which felt like hours, silence finally returned. The men had left. I was wishing that when I opened my eyes, I'd be staring at the ceiling in my bedroom, wishing that it was a dream. I hesitantly squinted through my eyelids. My eyes surveyed the room. I didn't see my ceiling fan. This was no dream. This was hell. I was at a loss. Panicked, I looked around me, trying to find some magic answer or solution. Instead, my sights landed on a familiar figure. My stomach dropped, and my heart skipped a beat. A small boy, working at one of the stations, his tiny fingers pressing dark material into a small box branded with an Ashbrook logo. He looked sickly and gray like the rest of them. There were wounds on his face and arms. They looked infected, like they hadn't been treated for months. Pus was oozing from them, as well as his ears, eyes, and corners of his mouth. My throat closed and my eyes watered. Jackson. That's Jackson. My nephew. That's impossible. Jackson was dead. I'd been to his funeral. I know he was dead. Yet here he stood, defying all human logic and reasoning. Had my brother taken him here for a cure? Why would he be here? This boy was still 5 years old. Frozen in time. He turned his head, and his eyes met mine. Wide, recognizing. Jackson? I whispered. His breath hitched. A flicker of something human returned to his face. Then, like something inside him snapped. He looked away and kept working, as if he wasn't allowed to acknowledge my presence. Before I could process any of what was going on, the councilmen's voices could be heard coming back down. They dragged yet another body forward. Not in a bag this time. I saw her face. Marley. She was dead, but wrong. Her skin sagged, splitting at the seams. Her panda tattoo hardly recognizable. Vile liquids were oozing from her mouth and eyes. Her body twitched, giving the illusion of life. But I knew better. Nobody could look like that and still be breathing. I watched as all the children turned their heads. Their eyes locked onto Marley. Slight smiles grew as they put down their work and limped right past me. Straight to Marley. They reached down, tearing into her flesh, eating whatever was within reach of their small hands. The councilman watched in disgust. She slipped through the cracks. Huh? One man said, half laughing. The other man responded more seriously. No, she was born here. You're too young to remember. Her parents took her out of town before her trials. She was sick, but they thought they could get her help somewhere else. We told them it didn't work that way. But they left regardless. Why'd she ever come back? The younger man asked with curiosity. Well, she never did get better. She had a child at some point, but her sickness was passed on to that baby of hers. That poor thing didn't make it more than a week. She swore we took the baby from her. Came looking for him. She couldn't come to terms with reality. Like I said, she was sick. She needed the trials. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed out. A high, sharp scream ripped through the air. I didn't even realize it came from me. I ran. I ran straight to Jackson. I don't know how. I had no control or feeling in my legs. Yet they moved forward. I grabbed him, pulling him to his feet. Come on, we're leaving. For a moment, he didn't resist. He followed me through the cavern, up the rusted staircase, out of the cellar, and then, Jackson stumbled. He shuddered violently, his body twitching unnaturally. Filth and pus seeped from his pores, his skin melting like candle wax. No, no, no. I grabbed him and tried to pull him further. I needed to get him into the car. But his arms dissolved in my hands. His eyes met mine one last time. They were full of sorrow. Understanding. Then, he was gone. Nothing left but rock, pooling at my feet. I choked back tears. They could never leave. None of them could. The children were gone. I raced to my Jeep and scrambled to grab my keys. Through my shakes, I was barely able to put the keys in the ignition. I didn't stop driving, didn't look back, didn't breathe until I was miles away. I locked myself in my apartment and began writing everything down, trying to make sense of it. I still hadn't fully processed what had just happened. Then, without a moment's rest, a sharp, burning pain twisted through my stomach. My hands shook. I thought it could be the anxiety, the fear, but then I remembered. The burger, the perfectly seasoned, melt-in-your-mouth burger. I'd eaten filth. I retched into the sink. But it's too late. Something inside me is rotting, changing. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know what will happen to me. But I know one thing. You can't outrun the sickness. If you're reading this, please, please, do not go to Ashboro. Do not eat their food. Do not ask about the children. Just stay home. Write that article about an albino fox. Whatever you do, just stay away from that town. Children of filth cannot be saved. Estimated reading time, 20 minutes. My favorite teacher at high school was Graham Milner. He was my head of year throughout the 5 years I was there and taught me for religious education in year 9. At that point, I had little interest in Ray or any of the humanities subjects and had in fact been moved down a set at the end of the previous year. My lack of enthusiasm evidenced by my effort and attainment grades, which had steadily declined over that 12-month period. I wasn't by any means a badly behaved kid, but I was a constant daydreamer. Certain teachers seemed to have little or no passion for their subject. Their voices a monotonous buzz of meaningless information, while their apparent boredom became infectious as I steadily lost interest and drifted into my own teenage fantasies. I had found the humanities staff who taught me in year 8 to be especially dull, and my daydreaming had become an inevitable release. Mr. Milner's approach to teaching made it impossible for me to switch off. In his mid-50s, he was by now firmly established at the school, and although he wasn't a particularly tall man, even the biggest lads in year 11 were terrified of him. He seemed at all times fearless and imposing, filling up every room he entered with the combined confidence of an adult man and the vitality of a teenager. I could only watch in awe as this whirlwind of energy would stride around the front of the classroom, his voice rising and falling in such a precise and controlled manner that every piece of information was stamped into my brain. Advertisements: Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, Islam. Throughout that year I soaked up everything. I never found out if Mr. Milner himself was a follower of any religion, but he always spoke respectfully of adherence to the topics we covered, emphasizing that each one demanded a disciplined lifestyle of commitment and self-respect. At the end of that academic year I scored the highest mark in the exam, an incredible 97%. My newfound enthusiasm for learning had spread to other subjects, reflected in my rising grades and my glowing reports from teachers. I credit this entirely to Mr. Milner. It was somewhere toward the end of the academic year, after having covered all major religions, that we were discussing the more general topic of spirituality and souls. And with the mention of spirits came a brief reference to ghosts. Mr. Milner rarely allowed himself to get sidetracked. He liked to remain firmly focused on the subject, and any slight shift in that focus had to be relevant in developing his students' knowledge before it was firmly realigned. Pausing to take questions that lesson, one of the boys asked, "Do you believe in ghosts, sir?" I was so accustomed to Mr. Milner's sharp and direct manner that my ear was able to appreciate the slight trace of unease as he answered in a low voice, "I didn't when I was your age. But then I saw one. Silence. The class had always given him their full attention. But now that attention was magnified tenfold and the need to know more was tangible. No one actually said it. But the words, "tell us," occupied the room like a sudden influx of hungry dogs with pleading eyes. Mr. Milner would never simply indulge this need in order to massage his ego or to appease a classroom full of young teenagers who should be focused on reading. But with all the material now covered, with all the results having exceeded expectations, and with all the class now firmly under his control, he rewarded us with the story that follows. Advertisements. When I was 14, my year at school went on a residential trip to Hope Valley in the Peak District. Back then, boys and girls went to separate schools. So there were just over 30 boys and 3 teachers staying at a hotel outside the village of Hope. We arrived on a Monday morning in mid-February for 5 days of hill walking. For most of us, it was our first time away from our parents. The weather wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Heavy rain the week before meant the area was now covered in a gray wash of thin fog. Despite this miserable tone, our spirits were high and we were looking forward to our adventure. We were the last group to be staying at the hotel before it was due to shut for renovations. So we had the entire second floor to ourselves, the third floor having already been emptied and cleaned in preparation for the closure. The first floor was mostly staff bedrooms, cleaning cupboards and laundry. The ground floor was taken up by conference rooms and the kitchen and dining area. There were perhaps 10 staff in total, overseen by the head caretaker, a kindly, round-faced man called Mr. Baker. He and his amiable black Labrador, Tosca, were the only permanent residents, because there was an odd number of boys in the year group and the rooms slept 2 apiece. I was the only one with a room to myself, a single bedroom in the very center of the second floor corridor. I did not know how it had been decided that it would be me who would have this room. But I assume it was because I was quietly confident and that I wouldn't put up any fuss about the matter. Which I did not. The room had only a bed, a sink, a wardrobe and a bedside chest of drawers. A small window looked out onto the misty hotel grounds below. Although basic, we were not expecting to spend a great deal of time indoors anyway. So it was cozy enough and I unpacked and settled in quickly that first morning. On that first day we walked the 5 miles or so up and around Mamtor, a hill in the heart of the valley. As boys, we laughed at the endless cowpaths and playfully jeered at how slow some of our number were in getting up the hill before pausing at the top to take a breather and look at the incredible view of the surrounding area. Everything was shrouded in a veil of fog. The catering staff had provided us all with a paper lunch bag consisting of ham sandwiches, a bag of crisps and a biscuit. We found a comfortable spot to eat and then it was a long walk back to the hotel. Once there, we were rewarded with tea and buns before showering and changing into clean clothing. Before our evening meal, we were given exercise books and told to start a diary about our trip. It was a simple and restful activity and we enjoyed having the freedom to write our accounts while chatting and sprawled out on the sofas, lounging across the wide staircases or sitting at the conference room tables rather than being behind regimented desks in an orderly classroom environment. The only real drama that day had been one of the teaching staff, Mr. Clark, twisting his left ankle as we made our way down Mamtor. The discomfort and annoyance was written all over his face and it was obvious he was suppressing the need to shout and swear as he'd hobbled alongside us. Most of us had mentioned his misfortune in our diaries, but we'd been careful not to present it in too humorous a manner. Our evening meal followed and then we had 2 hours to ourselves to read, quietly play board games or write a letter home. At 9:30 p.m. we were sent to our rooms and at 10 p.m. our teachers walked the corridor to ensure we were all ready for bed and that all lights were out. I could pick out Mr. Clark's limping gait as he passed my room. I quickly settled into the darkness. I was sure the other boys were now lying awake, almost certainly chatting and laughing quietly together in their pairs as they drifted off. Although I was a little jealous about being alone and having no one to snigger with as I fell asleep, I reassured myself that I'd probably nod off much sooner and feel far fresher the next morning. That first day had been fun but exhausting and I was definitely ready for bed. I'm sure we all were. It wasn't long before I was fast asleep. I know some of you might dismiss what happened to me next as obviously just a dream. But I know what I saw, and it was as clear to me then as I'm seeing you all now. I don't know what time it was when I opened my eyes, but it was still dark outside. I also don't know why I even opened my eyes at all. Both the room and the corridor were silent, and I'd been sleeping so deeply it was unlikely the mild creaking of contracting furniture would rouse me. I'd been dead to the world, and I can only assume that my mind or my body could simply sense that something was about to happen. I could feel a cold presence in the room that was more than the nocturnal drop in temperature. From the wardrobe walked a man carrying a pillow. The wardrobe doors remained closed. I breathed in sharply. In an instant, my entire body was overcome with fear. The back of my head remained pressed hard against the wall next to my bed. The rest of my body was like stone. I literally could not lift or even feel my arms or legs. I watched as he steadily made his way towards me, even though he was in no hurry. It was a short distance from the wardrobe to my bed, and I didn't have time to take in a single detail about what he was wearing. All I saw was his calm, expressionless face in the dark. He stood over me and placed the pillow over my head, then lowered it. I don't remember closing my eyes or even blinking. But in a moment, he was gone. I realized then that I was drenched in sweat. I can honestly say that if I'd walked into the shower in my pajamas at that moment, I wouldn't have noticed any difference. The only thing I remember feeling as I lay there was the cold. It was so cold. Horribly cold. For long seconds I gasped and choked for breath. I don't recall sleeping for the rest of that night. The sweat had dried against my body, but there was still a lingering chill, and even under the duvet I could not get warm. Maybe I did doze off at some point. Maybe I was in and out of sleep for minutes at a time. But for much of it I was awake with terror. It was without any doubt the worst night's sleep I have ever had in my life. As the first rays of sun came through my window, I finally felt able to lift my heavy limbs and get out of bed. We were expected to remain in our rooms until called for breakfast. But lack of sleep had left me almost delirious. I couldn't process rules or instructions at that point. I left my room and headed downstairs to the hotel foyer without even knowing what I would say if challenged. The only person in the foyer at this time was Mr. Baker. He was sitting in an armchair close to the fireplace, quietly reading to himself while Tosca lay contentedly at his feet. As I walked slowly down the stairs, I was reassured by the simple tranquility of this scene. The very color of the fire already making me feel a little warmer and secure. Mr. Baker looked up from his book. His eyes met my own, which I'm sure were now red with insomnia in heavy contrast to my pale and pasty skin. My awkward posture and clumsy, trembling movements were obvious indicators of my exhaustion. And then he said it. He actually said it. "My God, lad, you look like you've seen a ghost." I responded with nothing other than the obvious. "I think I have." The frailty in my voice came as little surprise to me. But Mr. Baker's face was suddenly one of concern. He put down his book, rose to his feet and walked towards me. He placed his hand on my forehead, then put the same hand on my shoulder and calmly said, "It's all right. Lad, come on, come with me," as he led me into the kitchen. His gentle manner and soothing tone honestly made me want to throw my arms around his reassuring bulk. Not only for comfort but to keep myself upright. Tosca followed, wagging her tail. Once there, I saw that the kitchen staff were busy taking in a delivery at the double doors at the other end and prepping the area to start breakfast. They didn't seem to notice us walk in as Mr. Baker pulled up a stool for me to sit on, then filled a kettle at one of the sinks and placed it on a hob. I wondered for a second if someone might say something about a dog being in the kitchen. But no one did. The heat radiating from the nearby ovens finally put a complete stop to my shivering. "What's your name, lad?" "Graham Milner," I replied. "Right, Graham. I'll make us both a brew and you can tell me all about it." I sat in silence as the kettle boiled and Mr. Baker got out 2 cups and asked if I wanted milk and sugar. He put my drink on the work surface next to me and then sat opposite me without saying a word. It was obvious he was going to let me talk at my own pace with no pressure or judgment. And feeling safe in his company, I told him what I'd seen. As I spoke, he didn't once interrupt me or stop me to clarify anything or to ask any questions. He just listened intently until I'd finished. Tosca sat by him the entire time, also appearing to listen intently. In the brief silence that followed, I sipped my tea and wondered if he believed me. If he thought I was lying or if he thought I genuinely believed what I was saying but it had been merely a dream or hallucination. A small part of me even considered, perhaps even hoped, that as the head caretaker, He might also have seen the ghost himself at some point. What room was this? Graham, did the other lad in your room not see anything? I've got a room to myself. Sir, in the middle of the corridor. Oh, right, I noticed how that piece of information had led to a slight change in the tone of his voice. I was sure he was going to say more, but at that point we heard the other boys and the teachers making their way downstairs. As they started filing into the kitchen, all washed and dressed, while I sat there in my pajamas, probably still looking utterly wretched. Mr. Baker went to speak to Mr. Clark, who was still dragging one foot from the previous day. I couldn't hear what they were discussing, but I could see their concerned expressions. The two of them came over to speak to me, and Mr. Clark spoke first. Are you all right, Graham? Mr. Baker has told me about what you think you saw last night. Are you feeling up to walking this morning? It was obvious that he wasn't going to indulge the idea of a ghost, perhaps because he didn't want to frighten the other boys or because he just didn't believe it, but he seemed genuinely worried about my obvious lack of sleep. Whatever the cause might have been, I think I'm all right, sir. I think I'll be okay to go walking. Fair enough, if you're sure. It's just that I'm staying here today to rest my ankle. Mr. Ross and Mr. Phillipson are taking the group out. If you do decide you'd rather stay here, it's an option. Why don't you go get dressed? Have some breakfast and we'll see how you feel then. I nodded in response. Mr. Clark now looked at Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, would you mind taking Graham back to his room so he can get himself sorted? Mr. Baker also nodded. And is there another room available where he might be able to sleep for the remainder of the week? I'm sure there is. I'll see what I can do. Sir, Mr. Baker replied. He once more placed his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Come on, lad. Follow me. It'll be right." As we left the dining room, I could feel the eyes of the other boys on me. I presume one of them had heard Mr. Baker speaking to Mr. Clark, and I was clearly the main topic of discussion over breakfast that morning. Even with the teachers putting a firm but polite stop to any nonsense and the conversations being held in hushed tones, I was sure I could already hear the word "ghost" being passed around. We took the stairs from the foyer to the second-floor corridor. Even with Mr. Baker's solid and dependable support, I felt uneasy making my way toward my room. This hotel is over 200 years old, so you never know what's hiding. I find out new things about it every other week. How long have you been the caretaker? Mr. Baker? Just over 10 years, lad. But I was the gardener before that, and when I was your age I helped out in the kitchen. Washing dishes, mopping the floor, stuff like that. Been here over 25 years now. I took a deep breath as Mr. Baker turned the door handle and opened the door for me to enter. The room was exactly as I'd left it. Mr. Baker asked if he could come in for 2 minutes before I got changed, and I was surprised by an adult asking my permission for anything. But I granted it. He made his way over to the wardrobe, opening its doors and checking the interior. Ah, now, when you said you had this room, I did wonder. I stood there watching him, curious. He closed the wardrobe doors, placed his fingers deftly around the back of it and moved it just a few inches to the left. Yes, there we are, he finished. I didn't know what he'd seen, or if I was expected to appreciate something. He ran his fingers against the section of wall where the wardrobe had been. Come here, Graham. Feel this? Hesitantly, I walked to where he was standing and let him take my wrist. He placed my hand on the wall, and with my fingertips I could feel a slight but noticeable groove beneath the wallpaper, running up the entire side of where the wardrobe had been. I had no idea what he was showing me, and I think he realized that. There used to be an adjoining door here. This room was connected to the one next door, obviously bricked up now, but what you can feel there is where the old frame was set. I was fascinated. Whatever you saw last night might have come through there at an earlier time, back when it was alive. You said it was holding a pillow? I couldn't believe it. Mr. Baker believed me. Yes, sir. And he placed it over your head? I noted that it had now become he. Yes, sir. I'm guessing something bad happened in here once. The matter-of-fact tone in which he delivered this did not in any way reassure me, and Mr. Baker was sensitive to this. Right, lad. I'll wait outside while you get dressed. Once you've done, pack up your stuff and I'll move you to another room down on the first floor. We're not having you spending another night in here. He did so, and I did as I was asked. As I knew he was right outside, I didn't panic or hurry as I washed, brushed my teeth and dressed. I packed my things and followed him downstairs to an empty single room. He told me it was a staff bedroom. But as they were not fully staffed due to the forthcoming closure, it was empty and would be mine now for the rest of the stay. For extra reassurance, he told me that his own room was at the other end of the corridor and he'd be available at any time. Day or night. Advertisements. I made my way downstairs to join the other boys who had by now finished eating and were putting on their walking boots and thick coats. Now suddenly ravenous, I wolfed down a huge breakfast of toast, eggs, beans and sausages. I found myself revitalized. And it wasn't just the copious amount of food, it was also Mr. Baker's understanding and the knowledge that I wouldn't be spending another night in that bedroom. With all the boys now ready, Mr. Ross asked me if I was still joining them for today's walk, and between a mouthful of food I said I definitely was. He seemed pleased but told me to slow down and that eating shouldn't be a race. I did as I was told, finished my meal and went to put my walking boots on before joining the rest of the boys who had been chatting amongst themselves while waiting patiently. Mr. Clark waved us off and then sat himself down in the foyer where I'd earlier encountered Mr. Baker, who was now outside tending to the grounds. Tosca had not gone with him. Instead, she once again occupied her place by the fire, this time in front of Mr. Clark's feet. The other boys were full of questions as we once again made our way out into the fog. Our two teachers quickly silenced their relentless barrage. But for the rest of that day my classmates would seize upon any opportunity to ask me about what I'd seen or what I thought I'd seen or what I thought I'd seen. Some were fascinated, some were cynical, but every single one of them had an opinion and most asked for more details. Answers to questions I didn't have because it had all happened so quickly. Just as Mr. Baker had implied, a murder must have taken place in that bedroom at some point. So the boys concluded the same thing from the information I'd provided. I was tired and somewhat distracted by their endless questions and comments. So it was only much later that week when I remembered one of them had clearly said, "I wonder who the victim was." And another had added, "Maybe her ghost is up there as well." Why he had assumed the victim was female I do not know. But as I said, I didn't even consider either of these comments until several days later. We'd be going home later that evening. Mr. Milner paused. One of the girls in the class raised her hand to speak and he nodded, motioning for her to ask her question. "I thought you said you were there for 5 days." "Sir, we were supposed to be." We were left dumbfounded. Presumably, the story wasn't over yet. "What happened next?" asked one of the boys. Normally this would have been followed by a reprimand for not raising his hand before speaking. But as the room remained perfectly orderly, Mr. Milner continued, "I was out walking with my year group for the rest of that day. This time we went up and around Wynn Hill. It was another long, tiring but fun walk. I remember the sandwiches that day being terrible, some sort of foul-tasting meat paste. Not like the thick cuts of ham we'd had the day before. Most of us barely touched them, so we were starving when we got back to the hotel." He paused again. I can't speak for the rest of the class. But at that stage one was so fully engaged in his story that even though it was mid-July, I shivered slightly as if I'd been outside with him in that February fog. When we got back, Mr. Clark immediately spoke to the other two teachers, Mr. Ross and Mr. Phillipson. We had no idea what about. But after our evening meal we were called into one of the conference rooms and Mr. Clark told us that we were to pack our bags and that we were heading home. Our parents had already been notified and would be refunded for the remaining days they'd paid for. "Did he tell you all why?" asked the same boy. This time, Mr. Milner did reprimand him, politely but firmly. "Remember to raise your hand before speaking." And yes, he did tell us why. We all looked briefly amongst ourselves in bewilderment before returning our gaze to Mr. Milner. He continued with the next part of his story. After we'd left to go walking, Mr. Clark took off his left shoe and sock so he could look at his ankle. The swelling had subsided, but there was now a nasty stretch of black and blue just above his heel. He rubbed at it pointlessly before putting his sock back on. But not his shoe. Tosca's ears had pricked up in curiosity and Mr. Clark now patted her on the head. Both of them enjoying the fire. Yesterday's newspaper sat on a side table nearby. It was probably to be his only distraction from the mundanity of the next few hours. So he was in no rush to start looking through it. He hoped that no one had attempted the crossword, as that was sure to keep him busier than whatever celebrity gossip had made the headline. He gave a deep sigh as he watched the dog sprawl out in front of the fire. It was going to be a long day. He heard footsteps coming from one of the floors above. It didn't generate any immediate reaction. It had to be the housekeeping staff going about their duties, and he certainly wasn't going to entertain the notion that it was the ghost that I had claimed to have seen the previous night. He put his left shoe back on and was about to take a look at the newspaper when he remembered that due to the hotel closure next week, only a skeleton staff was available and rooms were being cleaned every other day, and the next cleaning day was tomorrow. He'd watched the handful of kitchen staff leave after wiping the tables down, and they wouldn't be returning until 4 p.m. That left only Mr. Baker, who he could see from the front window was outside pruning shrubs. Bugger, he said out loud to himself. It might be one of the boys. In his discomfort, he'd rushed the head count that morning. He could be wrong. He still thought it was more likely to be a member of the hotel staff, but he'd better check anyway. He couldn't have a confused youngster frantically wondering where everyone had gone. And besides, he had plenty of time to kill. As if pre-empting Mr. Clark's movements, Tosca looked up from the mat. "Come on, girl," said Mr. Clark. "Keep me company." He set off along the ground floor corridor, deliberately avoiding the first staircase. He was determined to take his time over this. He may as well check everywhere thoroughly and get at least some exercise. He moved with short, pained movements, with Tosca following. The ground floor was completely empty, and completely silent. Even Tosca's soft padding feet were audible, and so were the footsteps coming from upstairs, both their rhythm and volume now becoming more erratic. He took the flight of stairs at the end of the corridor to the first floor. Tosca by now visibly delighted to be getting some attention and bounding ahead of him. The first floor was every bit as desolate. Before him lay a spotless corridor of flowered hexagonal wallpaper and burgundy carpet. Small paintings were hung intermittently. He started by knocking gently on the first few doors, trying each handle and discovering that, without exception, they were all locked. It seemed pointless trying them all. He could tell now that the footsteps were clearly coming from the second floor, and he made his way toward the next staircase. Advertisements from the floor above came a bang, a loud and angry sounding stamp. At this, Mr. Baker stopped in his tracks. Tosca barked in response and Mr. Clark shushed her. He continued on his way to the staircase and heard another loud stamp. Then another. Was one of the boys messing around? Had they heard him knocking on the doors on this floor, and were they now making fun of whoever it was by stamping their feet in response? In mental connection with what I had told Mr. Baker, he shivered slightly. He tried to put it out of his mind. Someone was definitely up there, an actual person. Not some phantom. Maybe someone upstairs had dropped something? Maybe the renovations had already started and the banging was just hammering? But it didn't sound like either of those things. And if renovations were to begin early, they surely wouldn't start on the only floor that was currently occupied. He was at the foot of the staircase now. He made his way up the first flight and turned. At the top of the next flight of stairs, to the left, was the opening to the second floor corridor. "Hello?" he shouted, disappointed at the weakness in his own voice. He was now genuinely nervous. The stamping footsteps were coming toward him. Any second now their source would be revealed. He almost couldn't bear it. His heart was in his throat as he gripped the banister rail and turned to go back downstairs. But then, the stamping stopped. It sounded as if whoever it was had walked furiously right to the end of the corridor but now refused to move any further. Mr. Clark stood on the stairs looking upwards, not daring to move either up nor down. "Hello?" he repeated, determined that his voice would be firmer this time. It was, but no response was forthcoming. Taking a deep breath, he slowly made his way up. It gave Tosca all the encouragement she needed. She bounded ahead of him, reached the top of the staircase, looked down the corridor and stopped dead in her tracks. "And wet herself, Tosca?" uttered Mr. Clark, all confidence now drained from his voice. "Tosca?" he tried again. The dog didn't hear him, couldn't hear him. Her eyes remained fixed on whatever was on the corridor, her ragged breathing interspersed with a low whining. "Tosca," he gasped hopelessly. It was a command this time. But the dog remained frozen where it stood. His own breathing was frenzied now. What the hell was the dog looking at? He didn't want to find out. In one deft movement, he strode to the top of the stairs with his back to the wall, stepping out with his back to whatever Tosca's eyes were fixed upon. Refusing to turn and face it, he grabbed the dog by its collar before running down the stairs. Yes, he ran. Despite the pain in his ankle, he ran. For that second he'd set foot into the mouth of the corridor. He knew that whatever had been there was standing right behind him. He had felt its freezing, necrotic breath against the back of his neck, as he ran, dragging the dog's limp body effortlessly in his fear-induced state of adrenaline. He heard laughter from above. Dreadful, dreadful laughter, the unmistakable sound of a woman's voice. Once again, silence reigned supreme. Mr. Milner sat at his desk looking quietly at the floor, his usually vibrant persona now sedate yet dignified. He looked up as if inviting questions, and as I was aware that the lesson would soon end, I slowly raised my hand. He granted permission with a nod in my direction. Did you find out anything about the ghosts? About why the place was haunted? I realized immediately after asking that I'd accepted everything he'd said without question. Mr. Milner had told his story with such conviction that I didn't even consider it might be a child's hallucination, a massive exaggeration of events, or even a complete work of fiction in its entirety. Yes, I did, he began. I found out much later that there'd been a murder at the hotel many years before. The caretaker at the time had smothered his wife with a pillow. They'd had a bitter argument in the foyer and he'd turned violent. So she ran to one of the upstairs rooms and locked herself inside. He had accessed the room via the adjoining door, which had since been bricked over. It was his ghost I must have seen, and I assume Mr. Clark encountered the ghost of his wife. The girl sitting directly behind me raised her hand. With the sound of the bell imminent, it was to be the last question. Mr. Milner looked at her and simply said, "Yes?" What was the name of the hotel? Mr. Milner thought for a second and replied with a half smile. "Oh, now that I'm not telling you." The class burst into a disappointed chorus of, "Oh, sir, come on." Seconds later, the bell rang out and we were dismissed. Blank. Underscore. Blank. I have never forgotten Mr. Milner's ghost story, and I've thought about it ever since. Though I've never tried to find out the name of the hotel, nor the identity of the spirits that haunted it. I think part of me would rather not know. I loved his story so much that I don't want to risk finding out that it might in fact be a complete work of fiction. I later qualified as a teacher myself, and my first position was working at my old school. Mr. Milner had retired before I'd arrived. I have no idea where he is today or if he's even still alive. For the 5 years I worked there, I was based in the same classroom where he told us his story. Around every Halloween I would tell it to my own groups as a reward for good behavior and attainment. And it never once failed to fascinate them. Now approaching my 50s, I believe it would be an absolute crime for his story to pass into obscurity. And transcribing it and making it freely available to all is my small way of paying tribute to a great teacher and great storyteller. I hope my memory of every detail is accurate, and I hope he would approve of my transcription. My favorite teacher at high school was Graham Milner. He was my head of year throughout the 5 years I was there and taught me for religious education in year 9. At that point, I had little interest in Ray or any of the humanities subjects and had in fact been moved down a set at the end of the previous year. My lack of enthusiasm evidenced by my effort and attainment grades, which had steadily declined over that 12-month period. I wasn't by any means a badly behaved kid, but I was a constant daydreamer. Certain teachers seemed to have little or no passion for their subject. Their voices a monotonous buzz of meaningless information, while their apparent boredom became infectious as I steadily lost interest and drifted into my own teenage fantasies. I had found the humanities staff who taught me in year 8 to be especially dull, and my daydreaming had become an inevitable release. Mr. Milner's approach to teaching made it impossible for me to switch off. In his mid-50s, he was by now firmly established at the school, and although he wasn't a particularly tall man, even the biggest lads in year 11 were terrified of him. He seemed at all times fearless and imposing, filling up every room he entered with the combined confidence of an adult man and the vitality of a teenager. I could only watch in awe as this whirlwind of energy would stride around the front of the classroom, his voice rising and falling in such a precise and controlled manner that every piece of information was stamped into my brain. Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, Islam, Throughout that year I soaked up everything. I never found out if Mr. Milner himself was a follower of any religion, but he always spoke respectfully of adherence to the topics we covered, emphasizing that each one demanded a disciplined lifestyle of commitment and self-respect. At the end of that academic year I scored the highest mark in the exam, an incredible 97%. My newfound enthusiasm for learning had spread to other subjects, reflected in my rising grades and my glowing reports from teachers. I credit this entirely to Mr. Milner. It was somewhere toward the end of the academic year, after having covered all major religions, that we were discussing the more general topic of spirituality and souls. And with the mention of spirits came a brief reference to ghosts. Mr. Milner rarely allowed himself to get sidetracked. He liked to remain firmly focused on the subject, and any slight shift in that focus had to be relevant in developing his students' knowledge before it was firmly realigned. Pausing to take questions that lesson, one of the boys asked, "Do you believe in ghosts, sir?" I was so accustomed to Mr. Milner's sharp and direct manner that my ear was able to appreciate the slight trace of unease as he answered in a low voice. "I didn't when I was your age. But then I saw one." Silence. The class had always given him their full attention. But now that attention was magnified tenfold and the need to know more was tangible. No one actually said it, but the words, "tell us," occupied the room like a sudden influx of hungry dogs with pleading eyes. Mr. Milner would never simply indulge this need in order to massage his ego or to appease a classroom full of young teenagers who should be focused on reading. But with all the material now covered, with all the results having exceeded expectations, and with all the class now firmly under his control, he rewarded us with the story that follows. When I was 14, my year at school went on a residential trip to Hope Valley in the Peak District. Back then, boys and girls went to separate schools, so there were just over 30 boys and 3 teachers staying at a hotel outside the village of Hope. We arrived on a Monday morning in mid-February for 5 days of hill walking. For most of us, it was our first time away from our parents. The weather wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. Heavy rain the week before meant the area was now covered in a gray wash of thin fog. Despite this miserable tone, our spirits were high and we were looking forward to our adventure. We were the last group to be staying at the hotel before it was due to shut for renovations. So we had the entire second floor to ourselves, the third floor having already been emptied and cleaned in preparation for the closure. The first floor was mostly staff bedrooms, cleaning cupboards and laundry. The ground floor was taken up by conference rooms and the kitchen and dining area. There were perhaps 10 staff in total, overseen by the head caretaker, a kindly, round-faced man called Mr. Baker. He and his amiable black Labrador, Tosca, were the only permanent residents, because there was an odd number of boys in the year group and the rooms slept 2 apiece. I was the only one with a room to myself, a single bedroom in the very center of the second floor corridor. I did not know how it had been decided that it would be me who would have this room, but I assume it was because I was quietly confident and that I wouldn't put up any fuss about the matter. Which I did not. The room had only a bed, a sink, a wardrobe and a bedside chest of drawers. A small window looked out onto the misty hotel grounds below. Although basic, we were not expecting to spend a great deal of time indoors anyway. So it was cozy enough and I unpacked and settled in quickly that first morning. On that first day we walked the 5 miles or so up and around Mamtor, a hill in the heart of the valley. As boys, we laughed at the endless cowpaths and playfully jeered at how slow some of our number were in getting up the hill before pausing at the top to take a breather and look at the incredible view of the surrounding area. Everything was shrouded in a veil of fog. The catering staff had provided us all with a paper lunch bag consisting of ham sandwiches, a bag of crisps and a biscuit. We found a comfortable spot to eat and then it was a long walk back to the hotel. Once there, we were rewarded with tea and buns before showering and changing into clean clothing. Before our evening meal, we were given exercise books and told to start a diary about our trip. It was a simple and restful activity and we enjoyed having the freedom to write our accounts while chatting and sprawled out on the sofas, lounging across the wide staircases or sitting at the conference room tables rather than being behind regimented desks in an orderly classroom environment. The only real drama that day had been one of the teaching staff, Mr. Clark, twisting his left ankle as we made our way down Mamtor. The discomfort and annoyance was written all over his face, and it was obvious he was suppressing the need to shout and swear as he'd hobbled alongside us. Most of us had mentioned his misfortune in our diaries, but we'd been careful not to present it in too humorous a manner. Our evening meal followed, and then we had 2 hours to ourselves to read, quietly play board games, or write a letter home. At 9:30 p.m. we were sent to our rooms, and at 10 p.m. our teachers walked the corridor to ensure we were all ready for bed and that all lights were out. I could pick out Mr. Clark's limping gait as he passed my room. I quickly settled into the darkness. I was sure the other boys were now lying awake, almost certainly chatting and laughing quietly together in their pairs as they drifted off. Although I was a little jealous about being alone and having no one to snigger with as I fell asleep, I reassured myself that I'd probably nod off much sooner and feel far fresher the next morning. That first day had been fun but exhausting, and I was definitely ready for bed. I'm sure we all were. It wasn't long before I was fast asleep. I know some of you might dismiss what happened to me next as obviously just a dream. But I know what I saw, and it was as clear to me then as I'm seeing you all now. I don't know what time it was when I opened my eyes, but it was still dark outside. I also don't know why I even opened my eyes at all. Both the room and the corridor were silent, and I'd been sleeping so deeply it was unlikely the mild creaking of contracting furniture would rouse me. I'd been dead to the world, and I can only assume that my mind or my body could simply sense that something was about to happen. I could feel a cold presence in the room that was more than the nocturnal drop in temperature. From the wardrobe walked a man carrying a pillow. The wardrobe doors remained closed. I breathed in sharply. In an instant, my entire body was overcome with fear. The back of my head remained pressed hard against the wall next to my bed. The rest of my body was like stone. I literally could not lift or even feel my arms or legs. I watched as he steadily made his way towards me, even though he was in no hurry. It was a short distance from the wardrobe to my bed, and I didn't have time to take in a single detail about what he was wearing. All I saw was his calm, expressionless face in the dark. He stood over me and placed the pillow over my head, then lowered it. I don't remember closing my eyes or even blinking. But in a moment, he was gone. I realized then that I was drenched in sweat. I can honestly say that if I'd walked into the shower in my pajamas at that moment, I wouldn't have noticed any difference. The only thing I remember feeling as I lay there was the cold. It was so cold. Horribly, horribly cold. For long seconds I gasped and choked for breath. I don't recall sleeping for the rest of that night. The sweat had dried against my body, but there was still a lingering chill, and even under the duvet I could not get warm. Maybe I did doze off at some point. Maybe I was in and out of sleep for minutes at a time. But for much of it I was awake with terror. It was without any doubt the worst night's sleep I have ever had in my life. As the first rays of sun came through my window, I finally felt able to lift my heavy limbs and get out of bed. We were expected to remain in our rooms until called for breakfast. But lack of sleep had left me almost delirious. I couldn't process rules or instructions at that point. I left my room and headed downstairs to the hotel foyer without even knowing what I would say if challenged. The only person in the foyer at this time was Mr. Baker. He was sitting in an armchair close to the fireplace, quietly reading to himself while Tosca lay contentedly at his feet. As I walked slowly down the stairs, I was reassured by the simple tranquility of this scene. The very color of the fire already making me feel a little warmer and secure. Mr. Baker looked up from his book. His eyes met my own, which I'm sure were now red with insomnia in heavy contrast to my pale and pasty skin. My awkward posture and clumsy, trembling movements were obvious indicators of my exhaustion. And then he said it. He actually said it. "My God, lad, you look like you've seen a ghost." I responded with nothing other than the obvious. "I think I have." The frailty in my voice came as little surprise to me. But Mr. Baker's face was suddenly one of concern. He put down his book, rose to his feet and walked towards me. He placed his hand on my forehead, then put the same hand on my shoulder and calmly said, "It's all right. Lad, come on, come with me," as he led me into the kitchen. His gentle manner and soothing tone honestly made me want to throw my arms around his reassuring bulk. Not only for comfort but to keep myself upright. Tosca followed, wagging her tail. Once there, I saw that the kitchen staff were busy taking in a delivery at the double doors at the other end and prepping the area to start breakfast. They didn't seem to notice us walk in as Mr. Baker pulled up a stool for me to sit on. Then filled a kettle at one of the sinks and placed it on a hob. I wondered for a second if someone might say something about a dog being in the kitchen. But no one did. The heat radiating from the nearby ovens finally put a complete stop to my shivering. "What's your name, lad?" "Graham Milner," I replied. "Right, Graham. I'll make us both a brew and you can tell me all about it." I sat in silence as the kettle boiled and Mr. Baker got out 2 cups and asked if I wanted milk and sugar. He put my drink on the work surface next to me and then sat opposite me without saying a word. It was obvious he was going to let me talk at my own pace with no pressure or judgment. And feeling safe in his company, I told him what I'd seen. As I spoke, he didn't once interrupt me or stop me to clarify anything or to ask any questions. He just listened intently until I'd finished. Tosca sat by him the entire time, also appearing to listen intently. In the brief silence that followed, I sipped my tea and wondered if he believed me. If he thought I was lying or if he thought I genuinely believed what I was saying but it had been merely a dream or hallucination. A small part of me even considered, perhaps even hoped, that as the head caretaker, he might also have seen the ghost himself at some point. "What room was this, Graham? Did the other lad in your room not see anything?" "I've got a room to myself, sir, in the middle of the corridor." "Oh, right." I noticed how that piece of information had led to a slight change in the tone of his voice. I was sure he was going to say more, but at that point we heard the other boys and the teachers making their way downstairs. As they started filing into the kitchen, all washed and dressed while I sat there in my pajamas, probably still looking utterly wretched. Mr. Baker went to speak to Mr. Clark, who was still dragging 1 foot from the previous day. I couldn't hear what they were discussing, but I could see their concerned expressions. The 2 of them came over to speak to me, and Mr. Clark spoke first. "Are you all right, Graham? Mr. Baker has told me about what you think you saw last night. Are you feeling up to walking this morning?" It was obvious that he wasn't going to indulge the idea of a ghost, perhaps because he didn't want to frighten the other boys or because he just didn't believe it, but he seemed genuinely worried about my obvious lack of sleep. Whatever the cause might have been, "I think I'm all right, sir. I think I'll be okay to go walking." "Fair enough, if you're sure. It's just that I'm staying here today to rest my ankle. Mr. Ross and Mr. Phillipson are taking the group out. If you do decide you'd rather stay here, it's an option. Why don't you go get dressed? Have some breakfast and we'll see how you feel then." I nodded in response. Mr. Clark now looked at Mr. Baker. "Mr. Baker, would you mind taking Graham back to his room so he can get himself sorted?" Mr. Baker also nodded. "And is there another room available where he might be able to sleep for the remainder of the week?" "I'm sure there is. I'll see what I can do, sir," Mr. Baker replied. He once more placed his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Come on, lad. Follow me. It'll be right." As we left the dining room, I could feel the eyes of the other boys on me. I presume one of them had heard Mr. Baker speaking to Mr. Clark, and I was clearly the main topic of discussion over breakfast that morning. Even with the teachers putting a firm but polite stop to any nonsense and the conversations being held in hushed tones, I was sure I could already hear the word "ghost" being passed around. We took the stairs from the foyer to the second-floor corridor. Even with Mr. Baker's solid and dependable support, I felt uneasy making my way toward my room. This hotel is over 200 years old, so you never know what's hiding. I find out new things about it every other week. "How long have you been the caretaker, Mr. Baker?" "Just over 10 years, lad. But I was the gardener before that. And when I was your age I helped out in the kitchen. Washing dishes, mopping the floor, stuff like that. Been here over 25 years now." I took a deep breath as Mr. Baker turned the door handle and opened the door for me to enter. The room was exactly as I'd left it. Mr. Baker asked if he could come in for 2 minutes before I got changed, and I was surprised by an adult asking my permission for anything. But I granted it. He made his way over to the wardrobe, opening its doors and checking the interior. "Oh, now, when you said you had this room, I did wonder." I stood there watching him, curious. He closed the wardrobe doors, placed his fingers deftly around the back of it and moved it just a few inches to the left. "Yes, there we are," he finished. I didn't know what he'd seen, or if I was expected to appreciate something. He ran his fingers against the section of wall where the wardrobe had been. Come here, Graham. Feel this? Hesitantly, I walked to where he was standing and let him take my wrist. He placed my hand on the wall, and with my fingertips I could feel a slight but noticeable groove beneath the wallpaper, running up the entire side of where the wardrobe had been. I had no idea what he was showing me, and I think he realized that. There used to be an adjoining door here. This room was connected to the one next door, obviously bricked up now, but what you can feel there is where the old frame was set. I was fascinated. Whatever you saw last night might have come through there at an earlier time, back when it was alive. You said it was holding a pillow? I couldn't believe it. Mr. Baker believed me. Yes, sir. And he placed it over your head? I noted that it had now become he. Yes, sir. I'm guessing something bad happened in here once. The matter-of-fact tone in which he delivered this did not in any way reassure me. And Mr. Baker was sensitive to this. Right, lad, I'll wait outside while you get dressed. Once you've done, pack up your stuff and I'll move you to another room down on the first floor. We're not having you spending another night in here. He did so, and I did as I was asked. As I knew he was right outside, I didn't panic or hurry as I washed, brushed my teeth and dressed. I packed my things and followed him downstairs to an empty single room. He told me it was a staff bedroom, but as they were not fully staffed due to the forthcoming closure, it was empty and would be mine now for the rest of the stay. For extra reassurance, he told me that his own room was at the other end of the corridor and he'd be available at any time, day or night. I made my way downstairs to join the other boys who had by now finished eating and were putting on their walking boots and thick coats. Now suddenly ravenous, I wolfed down a huge breakfast of toast, eggs, beans and sausages. I found myself revitalized, and it wasn't just the copious amount of food, it was also Mr. Baker's understanding and the knowledge that I wouldn't be spending another night in that bedroom. With all the boys now ready, Mr. Ross asked me if I was still joining them for today's walk, and between a mouthful of food I said I definitely was. He seemed pleased but told me to slow down and that eating shouldn't be a race. I did as I was told, finished my meal and went to put my walking boots on before joining the rest of the boys who had been chatting amongst themselves while waiting patiently. Mr. Clark waved us off and then sat himself down in the foyer where I'd earlier encountered Mr. Baker, who was now outside tending to the grounds. Tosca had not gone with him. Instead, she once again occupied her place by the fire, this time in front of Mr. Clark's feet. The other boys were full of questions as we once again made our way out into the fog. Our two teachers quickly silenced their relentless barrage, but for the rest of that day my classmates would seize upon any opportunity to ask me about what I'd seen or what I thought I'd seen. Some were fascinated, some were cynical, but every single one of them had an opinion and most asked for more details. Answers to questions I didn't have because it had all happened so quickly. Just as Mr. Baker had implied, a murder must have taken place in that bedroom at some point. So the boys concluded the same thing from the information I'd provided. I was tired and somewhat distracted by their endless questions and comments. So it was only much later that week when I remembered one of them had clearly said, "I wonder who the victim was," and another had added, "Maybe her ghost is up there as well." Why he had assumed the victim was female I do not know. But as I said, I didn't even consider either of these comments until several days later. We'd be going home later that evening. Mr. Milner paused. One of the girls in the class raised her hand to speak and he nodded, motioning for her to ask her question. "I thought you said you were there for 5 days." "Sir, we were supposed to be." We were left dumbfounded. Presumably, the story wasn't over yet. "What happened next?" asked one of the boys. Normally this would have been followed by a reprimand for not raising his hand before speaking. But as the room remained perfectly orderly, Mr. Milner continued, "I was out walking with my year group for the rest of that day. This time we went up and around Wynn Hill. It was another long, tiring but fun walk. I remember the sandwiches that day being terrible, some sort of foul-tasting meat paste. Not like the thick cuts of ham we'd had the day before. Most of us barely touched them, so we were starving when we got back to the hotel." He paused again. I can't speak for the rest of the class, but at that stage one was so fully engaged in his story that even though it was mid-July, I shivered slightly as if I'd been outside with him in that February fog. When we got back, Mr. Clark immediately spoke to the other two teachers. Mr. Ross and Mr. Phillipson. We had no idea what about. But after our evening meal we were called into one of the conference rooms and Mr. Clark told us that we were to pack our bags and that we were heading home. Our parents had already been notified and would be refunded for the remaining days they'd paid for. Did he tell you all why? Asked the same boy. This time, Mr. Milner did reprimand him. Politely but firmly. Remember to raise your hand before speaking. And yes, he did tell us why. We all looked briefly amongst ourselves in bewilderment before returning our gaze to Mr. Milner. He continued with the next part of his story. After we'd left to go walking, Mr. Clark took off his left shoe and sock so he could look at his ankle. The swelling had subsided, but there was now a nasty stretch of black and blue just above his heel. He rubbed at it pointlessly before putting his sock back on. But not his shoe. Tosca's ears had pricked up in curiosity and Mr. Clark now patted her on the head. Both of them enjoying the fire. Yesterday's newspaper sat on a side table nearby. It was probably to be his only distraction from the mundanity of the next few hours. So he was in no rush to start looking through it. He hoped that no one had attempted the crossword, as that was sure to keep him busier than whatever celebrity gossip had made the headline. He gave a deep sigh as he watched the dog sprawl out in front of the fire. It was going to be a long day. He heard footsteps coming from one of the floors above. It didn't generate any immediate reaction. It had to be the housekeeping staff going about their duties, and he certainly wasn't going to entertain the notion that it was the ghost that I had claimed to have seen the previous night. He put his left shoe back on and was about to take a look at the newspaper when he remembered that due to the hotel closure next week, only a skeleton staff was available and rooms were being cleaned every other day, and the next cleaning day was tomorrow. He'd watched the handful of kitchen staff leave after wiping the tables down, and they wouldn't be returning until 4 p.m. That left only Mr. Baker, who he could see from the front window was outside pruning shrubs. Bugger, he said out loud to himself. It might be one of the boys. In his discomfort, he'd rushed the head count that morning. He could be wrong. He still thought it was more likely to be a member of the hotel staff, but he'd better check anyway. He couldn't have a confused youngster frantically wondering where everyone had gone. And besides, he had plenty of time to kill. As if pre-empting Mr. Clark's movements, Tosca looked up from the mat. "Come on, girl," said Mr. Clark. "Keep me company." He set off along the ground floor corridor, deliberately avoiding the first staircase. He was determined to take his time over this. He may as well check everywhere thoroughly and get at least some exercise. He moved with short, pained movements, with Tosca following. The ground floor was completely empty, and completely silent. Even Tosca's soft padding feet were audible, and so were the footsteps coming from upstairs. Both their rhythm and volume now becoming more erratic. He took the flight of stairs at the end of the corridor to the first floor. Tosca by now visibly delighted to be getting some attention and bounding ahead of him. The first floor was every bit as desolate. Before him lay a spotless corridor of flowered hexagonal wallpaper and burgundy carpet. Small paintings were hung intermittently. He started by knocking gently on the first few doors, trying each handle and discovering that, without exception, they were all locked. It seemed pointless trying them all. He could tell now that the footsteps were clearly coming from the second floor, and he made his way toward the next staircase. From the floor above came a bang, a loud and angry sounding stamp. At this, Mr. Baker stopped in his tracks. Tosca barked in response and Mr. Clark shushed her. He continued on his way to the staircase and heard another loud stamp. Then another. Was one of the boys messing around? Had they heard him knocking on the doors on this floor, and were they now making fun of whoever it was by stamping their feet in response? In mental connection with what I had told Mr. Baker, he shivered slightly. He tried to put it out of his mind. Someone was definitely up there, an actual person. Not some phantom. Maybe someone upstairs had dropped something? Maybe the renovations had already started and the banging was just hammering? But it didn't sound like either of those things. And if renovations were to begin early, they surely wouldn't start on the only floor that was currently occupied. He was at the foot of the staircase now. He made his way up the first flight and turned. At the top of the next flight of stairs, to the left, was the opening to the second floor corridor. "Hello?" he shouted, disappointed at the weakness in his own voice. He was now genuinely nervous. The stamping footsteps were coming toward him. Any second now their source would be revealed. He almost couldn't bear it. His heart was in his throat as he gripped the banister rail and turned to go back downstairs. But then, the stamping stopped. It sounded as if whoever it was had walked furiously right to the end of the corridor but now refused to move any further. Mr. Clark stood on the stairs looking upwards, not daring to move either up nor down. "Hello?" he repeated, determined that his voice would be firmer this time. It was, but no response was forthcoming. Taking a deep breath, he slowly made his way up. It gave Tosca all the encouragement she needed. She bounded ahead of him, reached the top of the staircase, looked down the corridor and stopped dead in her tracks. "And wet herself, Tosca?" uttered Mr. Clark, all confidence now drained from his voice. "Tosca?" He tried again. The dog didn't hear him, couldn't hear him. Her eyes remained fixed on whatever was on the corridor, her ragged breathing interspersed with a low whining. "Tosca," he gasped hopelessly. It was a command this time. But the dog remained frozen where it stood. His own breathing was frenzied now. What the hell was the dog looking at? He didn't want to find out. In one deft movement, he strode to the top of the stairs with his back to the wall, stepping out with his back to whatever Tosca's eyes were fixed upon. Refusing to turn and face it, he grabbed the dog by its collar before running down the stairs. Yes, he ran, despite the pain in his ankle. He ran. For that second he'd set foot into the mouth of the corridor. He knew that whatever had been there was standing right behind him. He had felt its freezing, necrotic breath against the back of his neck. As he ran, dragging the dog's limp body effortlessly in his fear-induced state of adrenaline. He heard laughter from above. Dreadful, dreadful laughter. The unmistakable sound of a woman's voice once again. Silence reigned supreme. Mr. Milner sat at his desk looking quietly at the floor, his usually vibrant persona now sedate yet dignified. He looked up as if inviting questions, and as I was aware that the lesson would soon end, I slowly raised my hand. He granted permission with a nod in my direction. "Did you find out anything about the ghosts? About why the place was haunted?" I realized immediately after asking that I'd accepted everything he'd said without question. Mr. Milner had told his story with such conviction that I didn't even consider it might be a child's hallucination, a massive exaggeration of events, or even a complete work of fiction in its entirety. To begin with, my name is Samuel Terrence. I was a college dropout living a pretty sad life with my parents until a blackout that occurred in 2014. I recently posted a journal entry titled Blackout August 15, 14, that detailed a handful of weeks that would be the beginning of a bizarre string of events that, even now, have a hard time coming to focus in my mind. In this forum, I'll do my best to remember any and all occurrences within the past 10 years. I can't make any promises, but I'll write what stuck out to me. To begin with, I have to be careful with what I talk about. I don't know why they didn't wipe my laptop's hard drive, so don't ask me. And if my memory is right, Dick Cheney is Satan incarnate. My last update was cryptic, a standalone post that gained a bit of traction. It's taken a few months since my reappearance to recall, reflect, and do some research placing into perspective what exactly I've been through, hence the wait. In 2014, I began to journal a bizarre experience I was having during a blackout. Somehow, after this blackout hit my hometown, I found myself completely alone. No people, animals, or outside connections. From what I remember and have recorded, almost everything living had disappeared without my knowing. A mean windstorm had hovered in the vicinity of my town for as long as I was experiencing this phenomenon. Looking back, I would have gone mad if it hadn't been for a walkie-talkie system that somehow broke through my isolation and put me in contact with my friend Laura. I came to find out he was experiencing the exact same thing that I was. After some time of talking, we both witnessed and came into close contact with a set of rectangular-shaped objects that made us both physically ill. I was somehow able to escape this situation. To answer an obvious question early on, Laura is still missing to this day. I haven't talked directly to his family as of the time I'm writing this, but I've been aiding in his search the best I can. On the flip side, the official story of the blackout goes like this. On August 15, 2014, a blackout hit my city. It was resolved within the next 4 days. Supposedly, crime rates rose due to the loss of power, and turned into what authorities dubbed as a series of connected kidnappings. 5 other people besides Laura and I went missing between August 15th and 18th. Strange enough, law enforcement has stacks of files about sporadic and impossible burglaries occurring within this time frame. Some, according to reports, happened within the turn of a head and back. Other residents complained about sets of unmarked vehicles blocking roads. Most of these roads leading into the hills surrounding the city. Said residents also reported seeing smoke rising from far behind these blocked roads. I am the first and only missing person from this period to be accounted for, given. 10 years later, I was found, according to my mother, on the outskirts of my town by a drainage pipe. I was in a comatose state. I pushed for more details. And she said I was also found clean, well kempt, with my old backpack, and wearing a set of clothes I would have worn any other day as she last remembered. This was in September of 2024. My first solid memory in a long time was waking up in a hospital to a nurse tending to my vitals. There was a dried-out Play-Doh popsicle stick figurine on the window to my right, Bob. I was conscious again only 2 days after my retrieval. Come to find out I had been reported missing for 10 years. My parents had divorced, and I was presumed dead after half a year of searching. Now, I'm in my early 30s. My mother was the first to rush by. She cried, a lot. My father came next, and he scolded me, a little. It was so weird seeing them with a decade more of life than I had last seen them with. I greeted them as though I had just woken up from a long nap. The doctors were surprised, under the assumption I had been unconscious for so long, that I had retained my speech and motor skills down to a T. After the world was assured that I was well enough to pick on. The questions came. First my parents, then the police, then whoever else was interested. What do you remember? My response was that I simply didn't know. This was a partial lie. After the questions came an embarrassing physical exam. Something I'd imagined they would have done if I was unconscious anyway. They found slight traces of burn trauma covering most of my body. An array of heart problems only beginning with murmurs. And a small scar on the inner side of my right wrist, between the ulna and radius. Something they overlooked, as I feel it, is a small, round object not unlike a BB pellet lodged just beneath the scar. It freaks me out whenever I feel it. Or worse, get the intrusive thought to move it around. I haven't mentioned it to anybody. There was nothing else beyond that. I was back, and have been for a while now. I've been incorporating myself back into society little by little. I have a job at the local supermarket now. I have routine medical evaluations, and a strict diet and supplements set to follow. There was nothing else beyond that. Until pretty early on, I started to remember, and reflect, and research. Some people, when they remember something traumatic, tend to relapse or panic. I didn't panic, but I couldn't sit still. I reread my journal at some point, and along that line, I touched it up and shared it. Only then was I ready to find out the truth of what really started all those years ago. Before I share what I've pieced together, I wanted to preface my experience with an account that I stumbled across in my research. This, I hope, adds much needed context to what I've come to remember. The first sighting was on Easter Sunday of 1971. It began with the family of a man named J.E. Wilson. According to the online report I read, it was approximately mid-afternoon, and the family, mother, young son, young daughter, grandparents, nieces, nephews, and other extended family, had begun their yearly Easter traditions. After an hour of grilling, the family went about to set up their annual egg hunt. The daughter, along with one of the nieces, had seen it first. The two were lingering by the edge of the backyard near a tree line when the daughter screamed. J.E. Wilson and his brother-in-law ran over immediately and pulled the children away, suspecting a coyote problem that the Wilsons had been dealing with for some time. J.E. was confused when he saw a pair of red lights under the dark of the canopy. Daughter, brother-in-law, and niece retreated as the object came into focus. Gliding towards J.E., he described it as a dark rectangular prism. Black and shiny like used motor oil, roughly 10 feet tall. It had two red eyes. J.E. described them as looking more like taillights, that grew brighter in intensity as it approached. The object hovered 3 to 4 feet above the ground, and seemingly warmed the air around it. When it was less than 10 feet away from J.E., it stopped moving and focused the lights from its eyes onto him. When it had finished doing that, Wilson said it emitted a brilliant, quick flash of light that resulted in intense heat and a sound that he compared to a flashbulb. The brush in the general vicinity proceeded to burst into flames. JE recalled he was in too much pain to notice the object retreat. The family filled this gap in his statement, stating that the object disappeared just as slowly as JE said it had approached. Police were called, and a small investigation took place. Nothing definitive was found besides burnt brush on the forest's edge. According to a police officer I talked to, an older man and friend of my father's who worked as a deputy at the time, the Wilsons had moved out of town shortly after this encounter. No explanation given. This report was in an online forum. It disappeared a day after I print screened the full text. Not the report, but the whole forum site. If J.E. Wilson is still alive, I hope to contact him someday. If this is seen through, my communication with him will hopefully be recorded in my next post. I firmly believe that my written encounters in 2014 were with something consistent in both Wilson's sighting and what I would come to remember after I wrote my journal. With this out of the way, here is my account starting on September 7, 2014. This was when I had stopped typing. The following is imperfect and based solely on memory. Whether these memories were dreams, visions, or something else, that is for the reader to decide. I hold steadfast that my experience, as much as it's hard to admit, was very real, and agrees with the beyond. After finishing the last bit of my journal, I closed my laptop and went down the tunnel leading out of town. This was, in my mind at the time, the only option I had to escape whatever anomaly I was experiencing. I had a flashlight that ran on batteries the width of my thumb, and I used it indiscriminately for whatever light it actually gave. I was walking for a long time. I don't remember being afraid of the dark ahead, but the growing darkness behind me. I kept looking back towards the beginning of the tunnel to see if one of those god-awful things was following me. I never saw anything. It was at least an hour on foot to the other side of the tunnel. A travel I had taken for granted by car. I was upset when I saw that the other side was just as unoccupied as the city was. The tunnel drops off at a rural set of running hills. This should have been expected. The sky was much darker, still daytime, and the wind was strong enough to push my balance. All of my surroundings were way too saturated with color, leading me to think something was wrong with my eyes. I turned to my right, and there was something large and dark hovering at least 10 feet above the ground. Close to me, whatever this thing was, it looked like one of the rectangles, way elongated, and with a cube sitting on its top. The cube had 2 lights on 2 of its faces, versus 2 lights on one of its faces. I didn't get too good of a look beyond that it wasn't there 1 second. Then the next, it was. My vision tunneled either out of fear or the will of the object observing me. Then I blacked out. I woke up on a cold table in a monochrome, dimly lit room. Everything was dull metal, like a dark stainless steel. There was an ambient vibration that filled the area. This might have been an industrial fan. Behind this, I could hear feet shuffling around me. My vision was painfully nearsighted when I had woken up, and it didn't get any better as I tried to bring things into focus. From what I could garner, there were 3 people surrounding me. All 3 appeared, from my vantage point, as complete silhouettes. One of them reached out and dangled something in front of my face. This was Dad's Walkman. The voice that asked me, "What is this?" wasn't spoken aloud. It was ringing in my head, and the tone sounded indifferent. It took a moment for me to concentrate on what I was seeing. I couldn't tell you why, but I screamed like hell when I saw the speaker's hand holding the Walkman with long, spindly fingers. The skin was pale, and there weren't any fingernails. Starting at the wrist, and going beyond, was a form-fitting black sleeve. This hand was not normal. When I screamed, my head was jerked back to the table and my jaw spasmed shut. I couldn't make much noise after that. I saw them take a tape from somewhere, probably my book bag, and try their best to put it in the Walkman. They did this as a show for me. They made sure it was right in my sights. The song choice alone made me want to thrash around more than I already was. Only the Good Die Young, the one that had spoken to me, watched with dark bug eyes as I jerked my head around. My neck was the only part of my body that I could move. This memory quit sometime after the song started. Next, I remember waking up on another table, I knew this wasn't the same room because the wall to my right was gone. There was a tall hallway going out from this missing wall as far as I could see. It looked like the back room of a grocery store stripped of its pallet racks. My vision was normal again. And I could move my body. Naturally, I got up and walked. The rooms I had woken up in, including the first one, were much more sleek and clean over the rest of the compound. The facilities were clean, but I distinctly remember these two rooms being much more pristine. I don't remember many details about the actual hallways, other than their dark gray blandness and how high the ceiling was. Sometimes the ceiling would duck, stay that way for a while, then find its way back up. There were occasionally doors. There was even one close to the room I had woken up in. All of them were locked and reinforced, and nothing budged. It didn't take long for me to get extremely bored with this. Over the course of my stroll, I never got tired, hungry, or thirsty. I must have been walking for at least a month. I didn't see anybody or anything. A month in was when I decided to turn back and find the room I had woken up in. I decided the only way I was going to find any peace was if I could lie on that table again and close my eyes. It was less than a month back. Not even a week. I knew some shortcuts at that point when I got to the expanse where I could finally see the open wall. I noticed that the door closest to where I had woken up was open. The metal bars holding it shut were retracted, and the door was resting on the adjacent wall. Inside was a clean, large storage room with no extensions. Only fluorescent lights in the high ceiling. On the center floor was a tall rectangular prism. I stopped myself for a moment when I realized what I was looking at. There it was, in a room with a doorway too small for it to leave. Its eyes were dark, and it looked deactivated. To that, I simply backed out, shut the door over the best I could, and laid down on the table I found myself on in the beginning. It was oddly comfortable, and I fell asleep instantly. Next, I remember a handful of visions. They're all disconnected, and may have been years apart. I don't remember what led up to them, or what happened after them. Whatever stuck out in my mind, I'm writing down. First, I walked up to a door and looked into a room. I did not have any motor control. I had a feeling that all of these movements were pre-programmed. This room was pristine. Like the previous two I mentioned, in this room were 3 or 4, probably 4, figures. They were tall and thin, all holding what looked like skinny sledgehammers with both of their hands. They were raising the hammers above their heads and bringing them down to a shattered object on the ground. I recognized a strap from Dad's Walkman. They were moving fast, and all of their movements were blurry. One of them phased up to me. It didn't walk or run. It just floated towards me really fast. I got a good look at its face. Its head was shaped like an upside-down teardrop, and it had large, slanted eyes, pale skin, slightly bluish, no ears or hair, and a small mouth and nose. It bared these sharp little teeth at me. Its head turned slowly as it spoke right into my head. Blasphemy. Then it zipped back to the circle and began working with its sledgehammer again. The next 3 visions are interchangeable. I have not been able to pin a timeline on them. This one I'm almost sure was a dream. It began in a dark park. It was cold, but I could hear summertime bugs. I could only see about 10 feet out in front of me whichever way I looked. There were lampposts, but they and their light were only visible when I got right up to them. I remember hearing something large rummaging in the dark. It wasn't running or walking heavy. It was rummaging, and it knew I was there. It could see me walking around, but I couldn't see it. I remember panicking at some point and running to a bench. I laid down and thought I could play dead, so I closed my eyes and waited. I knew exactly what it was going to do when it walked up to me. I could feel it pressing down on my chest with massive hands. I squinted my eyes just enough so I could see what it was. It had thick arms with white fur that extended into the dark above me. Beyond that, I could see a pair of little glowing eyes. They were orange, and had black pupils that might as well have been the rest of the darkness. I closed my eyes again as it let out an airy growl. This one might have been a dream. I was in another room. This one was way too bright. A person, this thing was for sure a person, slid something to me on a table. I picked it up, and said something along the lines of, "What is this?" My question wasn't answered, and I don't remember what exactly the object looked like. It was box-shaped from what I remember. When I went to set the object down, It stuck to my fingers. When I complained, it vibrated like a trick gum pack you might get at a novelty store. I yelled, as it wouldn't come off my fingers and the vibration was uncomfortable. The more I yelled, the more it buzzed me. So I stopped yelling. The man, I'm sure it was a man, leaned forward. He was wearing a surgeon's mask, black suit, and face-fitting sunglasses. The mask was moving up and down, and he was laughing. I said, "What's up with you?" He stopped laughing and reached forward. He had on blue medical gloves that were too small. He pulled the little object off of my fingers, set it back down on the table, and stared at me too long for comfort. Then he started laughing again. This one wasn't a dream, in the sense that the others were. Here, I was looking down at a gap between one of the reinforced doors and the concrete floor. There was something wiggling freakishly from underneath it. The movements almost felt playful. It was, as far as I could tell, a set of long, pale fingers. These did not scare me as the others did. These felt different. They disappeared after a second of wiggling. Then they reappeared, sliding something under the door. It was a slip of paper, and I reached for it. Just as I got close to catching it, the fingers and the paper slipped back under the door. They reappeared a second later. This time, the paper had writing. I reached for it, and it slipped back in. The next time, I was prepared. I had my hand hovering over the spot where the hand would appear. In the split second before I smacked my hand down, I saw the paper had different writing. The moment my hand touched its hand, I knew the truth without even reading the paper. I laughed a little to myself and let go as it slunk back under. This one was my friend. I smiled, thinking about it now, in all of the uncertainty and emptiness I felt in that state. Something, for the first time since Laura, interacted with me, not talked at me, not looked at me, or used me, but interacted with me. This jumped to another disconnected memory too vague for me to describe in detail. This one was in a dark room, and it felt like a vision test with patterns of lights instead of a letter pyramid. I don't remember my surroundings or what the patterns were, but I do remember a large machine being pressed against my face, like a vision test. My next solid memory started in a low-ceiling hallway not dissimilar to the ones I found myself wandering around in towards the beginning of my experience. I had the perspective of standing and watching a conversation unfold. I couldn't see my body below me. Off in the distance, standing next to a more or less ordinary door, were two figures. One was a man, and the other was a very, very short person. The man was in a suit and had round glasses on. This wasn't the man who was wearing the surgical mask as I remembered before. The short figure was bizarre looking. He, or it, had a large, bald, from what I could tell, head and was wearing black coveralls paired with a matching military cap. He had long, pale fingers and was looking up at the suited man with his hands crossed behind his back. The suited man was expressing something accusatory at him. I felt an intense hatred for the suited man. Every kind of negative energy I could think of was coming off of him in waves. Yet his outward appearance was composed. I stood for a while, watching, then decided to walk up to them. They didn't seem to notice, and odd enough, I didn't even hear my own footsteps. I might as well have been invisible. When I approached them, the energy got to be overwhelming. This feeling almost drowned out my understanding that the person I was looking at was former Vice President Dick Cheney, and that the shorter figure was not a person at all. I knew this as a fact then, and I know it now. The short being looked at me with eyes that were large and sharp with scrutiny. Cheney didn't seem to register me until my energy began to bubble over, and I could feel my body emanating heat. I was damn close to them. He turned to me, still talking to the being, and said something like, "This is what I'm talking about. We can't have them floating around like this. They will hear and remember." The shorter being stayed quiet. From this moment, I took away that Cheney was behind most, if not all of this. It was a very strong notion. I hated it. I retreated back from the conversation and lost consciousness when the short being lifted its hand towards me. Then, there were people in surgical masks around me. I could feel that a point in the center of my forehead was open. It didn't hurt, but I could feel pressure. And they were working with needles. Cheney was standing to my right, looking content, but not smiling. I hated that man like hell. I was getting a download to my brain that kept telling me, it's him. It's his fault. I didn't have enough energy to put up with the surgeons. or him, so I just lolled off. When I woke up next, something did hurt. My right wrist, lower back, and both of my knees. Nothing from my forehead. I was standing up in the center of a small, dark room lit by an orangey incandescent bulb. This was the first time I registered my age. I've always been thin. Here, I was more filled out. Not padded, but healthy. I knew I wasn't old, but rather older. I was well groomed. My hair had been shaved, nails clipped, and on my face, I could feel full stubble. I was used to it being patchy. For once, I wasn't wearing a windbreaker and jeans. I was in a hospital gown. My skin, once irritated and patchy with sores, looked long-healed. I was standing there and looking at this ratty door. There was not a handle on the inside, but there was a sliding cover at eye level, like you would see in a prison. Just as I'm thinking of this sliding cover, it opens, and I run up to it. There was somebody looking through it. Their eyes were dark and large. "You're awake." "I am. I have your stuff. Thank you." It didn't have to, but at this point, the person raised their head and positioned their mouth over the opening. "You're welcome." It had a small mouth and sharp teeth. It was one of the teardrop people. It noticed that I noticed what it was. "Please don't be scared." "But I am." "Don't. I'm going to open the door. But you better not run." "Is that a threat?" "We'll see." It opened the door and stood in front of me. Full-figured. It blurred itself so I didn't have to look at it directly. The only features I could see clearly were its eyes. It proceeded to glide down the hallway to my right, and I followed it. I wasn't scared then. It was tall, but it was also gangly. If it tried anything, I could probably help myself. "Who are you?" "I'm Jerry." "Jerry? You have a name?" "Might as well. You just thought of that name." "It wasn't my idea." "What's your real name?" "Just follow me." "JFM? Sure." "Jerry Fitzgerald Martin? Sure. I like that." I kept following Jerry down the hallway until he opened a door on our left and went in. This room was bright in lighting and color. As far as I could tell, it was a locker room. He floated over to and opened a locker. Jerry took my book bag and a set of folded clothes out. "They're clean. Thank you." He handed the clothes to me and set the book bag down on a bench. "You're wearing coveralls?" "Yes." "What are you?" "As much of you as anybody else." "Are you a ghost?" "Not quite." "You're not human." "Are you?" "Not in the way you think of it." "No." "An angel?" "Not really." Jerry paused and reached behind his back. He pulled my laptop out of thin air and put it into my book bag, tapping it with his forefinger. "You'll need this. Trust me." "I will." "You will." I put my clothes on as Jerry picked up my book bag and held it. When I was dressed, I put my arms out scarecrow style as he put the book bag over my shoulders. He took an extra moment to adjust Bob, who had been zipped halfway in my book bag the entire time we had been down there. Jerry glided to my front and looked at me dead on. His image stopped blurring. This confirmed the observation I had made earlier. Jerry was one of the beings I had seen over the course of my experience. He was not of this world. They're going to want to silence you. The information you have written in your laptop is valuable beyond anything else you know. Guard it with your life. You'll piece the rest together when it's time for you to do so. Why are you doing this for me? What they've done is wrong. I understand. I know you do. Take my hand. When I did, a staircase appeared in front of us and we began to walk up. Stay in touch. When I woke up at the hospital, I had amnesia. I knew what my parents were telling me, and I vaguely remembered the blackout of 2014. I did not remember anything in between. Weeks into the recovery, they started to come in flashes. Always when I was alone. Each flash would accumulate to one memory for every 3 days. I wrote them down. They meant something. Whether a symbolic representation of a fight for consciousness, or actual happenings, it wasn't as hard to grapple with emotionally as I thought it would be. It was just hard to believe. I might talk to a psychologist someday to get some kind of affirmation. It depends on how things progress. Right now, though, I feel at an odd peace. As much as everything that started on August 15, 2014 is unexplainable to me. My personal connections, law enforcement, medical experts, and beyond, I'm confident in saying that I've experienced, firsthand, a series of high strangeness events. These have ranged from close encounters of the first, second, third, and fourth kind, to out-of-body experiences. I know that, As much as I would like to call the passages you just read, memories, or visions, I can't deny the evidence anymore. My wrist, my skin, my health, my journal, the vagueness and vividness that I remember everything in. But something else. When I rummaged through my backpack for the first time since I had left the hospital, I noticed a small envelope taped to the back of my laptop. The outside said, "Sorry for the Walkman." Inside, there was a slip of paper, roughly the same size and shape of a dollar bill. Paired with a crudely drawn design was a single word in crayon, Spacebucks. The name of the Mandela effect comes from the fact that a surprising number of people claim to remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, when in reality, he lived until 2013. Some conspiracy theorists take this as proof that reality is somehow glitchy, that we're sliding between timelines where history plays out slightly differently. For myself, I always thought the Mandela effect was no big deal. People's memories are fuzzy. End of story. So what? But then it happened to me. My high school class held their 10-year reunion in our school's gymnasium. The gym was decked out like a high school dance, a DJ spinning records, streamers dangling from the ceiling, a long table for refreshments. There were poster-sized photos of our cultural icons on the walls, Adele and Idina Menzel, Black Lives Matter and the Babadook. Above the refreshment table hung a gigantic banner proclaiming, "Class of 2015. We'll never forget." I entered the gym just as the DJ was queuing up Iggy Azalea's Fancy. On the floor, several dozen late 20-somethings sprung into action, lip-syncing Iggy's opening rap furiously, as if they were still in da murda business. I shook my head, feeling a surge of embarrassment for them. I'm not sure why, but I felt a nervous lump in my throat as my gaze scanned the room. I felt a bit out of place. I mean, sure, I'd gone to school with these people for 4 years, but that felt like a lifetime ago. So many of the faces looked like strangers, like I'd never met them before. But I shrugged it off. My wife, Jennifer, said she'd felt the same estranged vibe when she'd gone to her reunion last year. I guess, no matter how close we get to people, time eventually makes strangers of us all. I headed toward the refreshment table, eyeing the punch bowl. I chuckled as I mused whether anyone had spiked it. I was getting confused looks from people as I passed them, as if they didn't recognize me. That felt unsettling, but it sort of made sense, since I didn't recognize them either. Then I bumped into a woman I recognized, literally. "Sorry," I shouted, straining to be heard over the pumping music. I did a double take. "Hey, you're Haley, right?" Haley nodded weakly, but said nothing. She gaped at me, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "Mike," I said, reminding her of my name. "Mike Collins." "Why, yeah," she replied, her face contorting into the same confused stare I'd already seen on a half-dozen faces. Then she turned on her heel and scurried off, her chestnut hair rippling behind her like a cape. Weird, I thought, but then a memory swam into my consciousness. It was a distant hazy image, Christmas break. A beer-lubricated party in a suburban basement. Haley and I on a couch, blitzed, making out, and very horizontal. I chortled. No wonder she was freaked out. I thought, nothing like seeing a long-forgotten hookup to throw cold water on your night. I was still laughing when I found myself face to face with another blast from the past, Bobby Reynolds. "Hey," I exclaimed excitedly, offering a fist bump. "How you been?" But Bobby didn't seem happy to see me. Fine," he answered, his eyes shaded in perplexity. "Mike Collins," I said, figuring that Bobby had forgotten my name. Bobby said nothing. I let out a frustrated huff. "Okay," I declared. "I've been getting weird vibes from people since I got here. What is it? Has my face really changed that much?" Bobby squinted. "It's just that," he intoned, his gaze falling to the floor. "It's just that, I thought you were dead." "No friggin' way," I cried. "Where'd you get a dumb idea like that?" Bobby shook his head. "I don't know, I just thought." He shrugged. "I mean, everyone kind of assumed." I cut him off. "Well, as you can see," I snapped, stretching out my arms. "I'm not dead." "Sure, bro," Bobby said. He stood stock still for a second, then patted my shoulder. "Take care, okay?" I watched Bobby shuffle away. This was messed up. Dead? Me? Where'd such a stupid rumor come from? My mouth went dry. I made my way to the refreshment table and ladled some red punch into a plastic cup. I gulped the punch greedily, relieved as the sugary drink coated my throat. I looked up. Dead ahead of me, on the wall, were a series of poster-sized photos, blow-ups of various students' yearbook photos. I studied the picture of a familiar Latina, her hazel eyes alive with fire. Her face exuded ambition, like she was eager to take on the world. There was a placard posted beneath the picture, most likely to succeed. It read, which had been her superlative in our class yearbook. I nodded. I remembered Trini Lopez, how driven she'd been, and how frighteningly smart. I vaguely recalled seeing a newspaper article about her a few years back. She was now an attorney at the Federal Communications Commission, or something prestigious like that. My eyes roved down the line of pictures and placards. Our class jock had been dubbed most likely to win a gold medal. Our class clown? He'd been most likely to host Saturday Night Live. And so on. Until, at the far end of the wall was my photo. I squinted to read the placard beneath it. Most likely to die first. What the hell? I gasped. But then I cracked into a grin. No wonder everyone thought I'd died. Someone saw my photo with the stupid placard, thought it was true, and spread the moronic rumor. Mystery solved. My relief was only momentary, though, because, yes, we'd voted for a most likely to die first. For our yearbook, it had been a joke. A bit of teenage gallows humor. But I knew the unlucky student we'd chosen had been someone else. Not me. I racked my brain for a name. Who'd it been? Who was our most likely to die first? A smile crept to my face as the image of a chunky, happy-go-lucky kid surfaced in my thoughts. Brad Barman. He'd been the kid who'd taught me to use a beer bong. The parties at his house were legendary, bacchanalia popping with teenage sound and fury. In retrospect, it was amazing that we'd survived the parties he hosted without getting arrested, or worse. Just then, a raven-haired, serious-eyed young woman approached the punch bowl. I recognized her in an instant. Jessica Rosenbaum. Our class secretary. She'd been the one who'd organized our reunion. Jessica, I said, tapping her on the shoulder. She darted around, spooked. Once again, I found myself on the receiving end of an unnerving stare. I ignored it. I pointed to my picture. Jessica, what's up with this? Why do you have my picture above most likely to die first? Jessica kept staring. I pressed on. Most likely to die first was Brad Barman. Remember? Bewilderment seized Jessica's face. Who? My frustration boiled over. Oh, come on, I cried. The joke's over. Brad Barman, you have to remember him. His parents were never home. We went to his house for keg parties. We called him Last Call Barman. How could you forget? Jessica stepped back, intimidated by my onslaught. I don't know, she muttered, then slinked away. I hurled my empty cup into the trash. I'd had enough of this scene. I was going home. I was driving too fast. But I didn't care. My hands clenched the steering wheel as the car zoomed along the shadowy road. I took one deep breath after another, in an effort to calm myself down. I thought about my wife's mantra, always look for the funny side of life. But what was so damned funny about a room full of people thinking you were dead? Then an anecdote sprang to my thoughts. I'd majored in English in college, and one of my favorite writers was the humorist Mark Twain. Once upon a time, newspapers got false word that Twain had died, and promptly printed the story. But one amused journalist, who knew that the rumor was false, reached out to Twain for comment. I've heard on good authority that I'm dead. Twain had deadpan, but rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Greatly exaggerated, I hooted. Twain's raw wit boosted my mood. As it always did, I decided that, when I got home, I'd tell Jennifer about how I died at my reunion, then ask her if it was too late to take out a life insurance policy on me. Laughter overcame me. Maybe I laughed too hard, because just then I felt a headache coming on. I spotted a mini-mart and decided to take a break. I parked my car and entered the store. I scooped up a Gatorade and travel pack of Tylenol, then stepped up to the front. The cashier, a sleepy-eyed young man wearing a blue shirt and jeans, studied me. His name tag read, Chad. You okay, man? Chad asked. You look a bit pale. I snickered. It's been a long night. I explained. A weird, long night, I'll bet. Chad replied and rang me up. Outside, I washed down a couple of the Tylenols with Gatorade and got back into my car. The headache went away as I drove the rest of the way to my house. Home sweet home. I inched my car into the driveway and killed the engine. I walked toward my house slowly, contemplating how I'd tell Jennifer about my surreal evening. Our mailbox stood atop a pole by the sidewalk. I noticed that its flag was still up. As usual, my wife had neglected to take in the day's mail. With a sigh, I sauntered over to it, opened it, and drew out the mail. I leafed through the letters and bills as I paced toward the house. I froze. The mail. It was all addressed to Brad Barman. A shiver sparked through me. I looked up at my house. A woman peered out of the front window. She looked baffled. It wasn't Jennifer. Numbly, I staggered back to my car and drove away. My thoughts a blurred jumble. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting in the parking lot of a pancake house. I've been here for the last 2 hours. I've sent out texts to all my contacts. But so far, no one's replied. That's why I'm posting this. I need help. I'm leaving my phone number at the end of this post. If someone, anyone, went to Hall High School 10 years ago and remembers me, please call me. My name is Mike Collins, and I'm not dead. My name is Anthony Perkins. If that name sounds familiar, then you've likely seen my videos on TikTok and the like where I review toys and video games with my mom and dad. Don't try to look them up, nor expect me to tell you the channel name. I'll explain that later. I was born on January 20th, 2012. I was the third child out of 4. But I wasn't born normal. I was born with a clubbed foot, a cleft lip, and a skull deformation that makes my head both too large and rather flat. And my eyes bulge from my sockets much like a bullfrog. My older siblings, Kaylee and Jonathan, were born normal, leaving me to be the sad freak. Because of this, I was always the center of attention. My mom coddled me as much as she could, even taking videos of me doing whatever babies do to make sure I felt part of the family. Sibling rivalry, I'm sure you could imagine, was a bit of an issue growing up. Well, Kaylee was grown enough to understand more so than my brother. I feel like John hated me for even existing for a while. But things eventually patch as you get older. Things weren't much better in public though. Everywhere we went, strangers gave me looks that ranged from utter disgust to sorrow. I always felt judging eyes on me, like my very existence was a sin, and that I should never have been here. Being at school didn't help, being that my brain was affected by the deformations of my skull. It made learning difficult. I was always in special needs classes. That didn't keep me from being the target of laughter by me peers. Kids pointed and laughed. Some pretended to vomit when I would walk in the hallway. But now, do I wish it was just that? For at least my family was whole and loved me. Not long after my 5th birthday, in the spring of 2017, my mother gave birth to my younger brother, Edward. However, neither me nor my siblings got to meet Edward. Eavesdropping my parents, I learned that he was born with much of his skull undeveloped, and being born with his entire brain exposed. He would die 2 days later. My family was heartbroken. It didn't help that a lot of the toys my parents bought for Edward remained untouched, sitting as a constant reminder. That changed close to the summer, and so would all of our lives. My mother, who coped with the loss by watching videos of children playing on YouTube, came across a channel with 10 million subscribers where the son in the videos opened and reviewed toys and other such content. That night, my mom and dad got some small production equipment and talked to my siblings about starting a similar YouTube channel. To kickstart the channel, my mom uploaded the home movies that she and my dad had on hand. They figured that I should be the star of the channel, believing that the popularity would help me feel better about my disabilities. Then we uploaded the first video. My mom had me open and review the toys originally meant for my brother, Edward. Popularity was slow, but within a year, the channel took off. We had received 500,000 subscribers in less than 10 months. And as the channel grew, so did the brand deals. My mom and dad received toys from well-known corporations nationally and internationally. The Japanese and Korean toys were always a favorite of mine. Subscriber numbers grew and grew. We were living more well off than we thought possible. My dad was able to keep secure when he was laid off in the autumn of 2018. As much as I liked having a positive experience with my family, and playing with all the toys I got. Things were starting to get uncomfortable. Every time we had family over or we went over someone's house, all anyone would ever want to talk about was the channel. All my cousins could talk about was how cool it must have been to have toys dropped off to me and play for a living. I mean, it was. But I'd always feel like I was losing myself to this on-camera reviewer version of me. But my parents always supported me, and I didn't see anything truly bad about the situation. That was until the school year of 2019. When I was supposed to return to school, my mom had decided to keep me home from school. "You're doing so well with this review channel that you don't need to return to school," was my mom's reasoning. My dad thought that my mom was going too far with this channel thing, and that maybe we should slow it down for my education. He doesn't need public schooling. Besides, Kaylee's taking a gap year before returning to college. She can teach him. I wasn't opposed to Kaylee teaching me, but it seemed like my mom forced this on her rather than her volunteering to it. But between reviewing toys and video games, my sister tutored me with a beaming smile on her face. Then comes March 2020. What was supposed to be 2 weeks off for everyone in the country turned into total quarantine. With no one being allowed to go anywhere, my mom cranked out the videos. To be honest, at this point, I was growing bored with the reviews. I was enamored with the books my sister had been tutoring me with. When I told my mom this, and that maybe I would want to be a writer when I grow up, she was less than enthused. "You are not mentally capable enough to do something so complex with your life. These reviews are what you're best at. Stick with them." If that wasn't bad enough, I overheard my mom scolding my sister for putting unrealistic ideas in my head. I didn't see my sister for a week. My mom made sure to keep me from her with the video reviews. And with her creating another channel on TikTok, the videos only became more frequent. When I did manage to catch a glimpse of my poor sister, she had a bruise along her cheek. She wouldn't even look at me. I was given the same look I used to get by people when I was younger. Utter disgust. Things only got worse the following year when my sister left for university. With one person less to take care of, my mom filled up the space with the channel. She made me review toys I wouldn't even be interested in. And when I would object, she would damage or throw away anything I actually liked playing with. Every night, I would hear mom and dad bicker. Sometimes argument ended with glass being thrown and chairs knocked over. It wasn't long before my parents divorced. My mom made sure my dad got nothing, and that we weren't allowed to see him. I felt especially bad for Jonathan. Besides always being left alone, the fighting and the divorce only ate at him more and more. Even before dad left, my brother was growing more irate with each passing day. Sometimes awful smells would come from the inside of his room. I snuck inside his room one day while he was at school, and I found a drawer by his bed filled with needles and burnt spoons. December 12, 2022. My brother was skin and bone. His hair was falling out, his teeth crooked, his arms scarred and pocked. My mom was out grocery shopping, and I wanted to talk to my brother about what I found. "It's none of your fucking business what's in there," he yelled at me. "Why do you care? You gonna tell mom about it? Go ahead. She doesn't give a shit. Ever since she started that goddamn YouTube channel, she's ignored this family. If you hadn't been born." He stopped there before slamming the door in my face. I don't know if he stopped because he really couldn't stand looking at me, or if he felt bad for blaming me, but I never found out. The paramedics arrived the next day and took him away. It was only 6 months ago that my mom finally ran out of content to make. She spends more time going out looking for new toys for me to review than she's been home for the longest time. Thankfully, I still have the school books Kaylee left behind when she went to college. It felt good to read, write, do math, learn science. I finally felt like a real kid when I immersed myself in these books. Until my mom found out, thinking she'd found a new source of content. "Look at my little scholar. What are you reading, buddy? Let's give you a hard question. What's 5 times 5? My mother asked me with the camera pointed in my face. "It's 25, Mom." She sighed and asked me, "Can't you just say something funny like 13 or 55? It'll make for great content." She just couldn't get the camera away from me. Not for the first time, but definitely the most intense I've asked myself. Does my mom even really love me? Am I just a content farm for her? If I demanded she stop this content, Would she just leave me behind? Things came to blows 2 hours ago when I confronted her for throwing out the books Kaylee left. Because this is useless to you. Look at you, Anthony. Do you really think you can understand this? Do you really think of me as some moron? I finally asked her, do you only see me as an advertisement than a son? My mom got that look of utter disgust on her face. I am doing this for you. Everything from the start was for you. Why are you being so obnoxious? All you need to do is say stupid things about these toys and we make a lot of money. I know your head is broken. But how can you not see that? So it was true. My mom only sees me as a moneymaker. She no longer looked at me like a child. Just a prop for the camera. Is this really about me? Ever since Edward died, you've pushed everyone away from you. For me, I don't want to do these stupid videos anymore. I hate you. My mom slapped me across the face and stormed out of the house, leaving me alone in pain and totally rejection. I was in my head thinking about how little my mom thinks of me when the train of thought was broken by a buzzing. My mom's phone. She left it here. I picked up the phone and checked it. There was a message, and it was from Kaylee. How could you throw out those books? The message was cut off. I opened my mom's phone and checked her messages in full. There were a lot of messages. From my dad, Kaylee, Jonathan. I decided to check on the message from Kaylee first. How could you throw out those books? I left them for Anthony. He needs real structure. Kaylee, still thought of me? I scrolled up the messages. They were all of Kaylee asking how I was. She was criticizing my mom for not letting me have a normal childhood. I checked the messages from my brother. Similar messages. Even messages about him being addicted to drugs and wanting to get clean. Well, if you weren't such a loser, then you wouldn't need them. Stop trying to take attention from your brother. How could she say that to him? Of course he lashed out at me. I took all the attention away from my family. All because of this damn channel. Then finally, I checked the messages from my dad. Just awful messages about how he was a terrible person. And even lied to him about how we didn't miss him. I would live with my father if he wasn't across the country. Then finally, I checked the comment for the videos. Near millions of comments drooling over my mom's abuse. Losers who watched a child review things against their will. Even all the comments saying things like, "Aw, how cute," mean nothing to me. Liars just trying to feel better about themselves. If they knew what actually happened, they'd say I should rather have never been born. All my life has come to is being used for money. And my family's lives have been torn apart from it. No more. I'm going to end this cycle of abuse. I changed the passwords to my mom's accounts and deleted the videos. I'm going to destroy this legacy like it destroyed us. I'm currently writing this from my mom's phone in my bedroom. Next to me is my mom's handgun that she kept in the bedroom after my dad left. To my mom, I hate you. You've ruined this family and I'm not letting you push me around anymore. To my dad, if you're reading this, I wish we were together with you. And only you. To Kaylee, thank you for trying to provide me a normal childhood. I wish I could see you before I go. To Jonathan, I'm sorry mom's devotion to the channel pushed you away. And Edward, I'm sorry I never got to meet you. But I'm glad you didn't see what happened to our family. I'll see you both soon. This has been Anthony Perkins. And this is the last will and testament to a camera pet. Well, I am death. None can excel. I'll open the door to heaven or hell. Ralph Stanley. O death. From, O brother, where art thou? November is a month that shows us what comes after change. Gone are the colorful leaves and spooky celebrations of October. Gone are the cornstalks and beans from farmers' fields. And pumpkins too. What remains? Bare branches, brown grass, and a perpetual chill in the air. Not yet icy. Gratefulness, too, for what has come before, and what might come afterward. Remember me? I'm Tennant, a writer for a horror magazine called Mundi Macabre. I recently submitted a story about Sophie Taffis, the owner of a shop called Cinderella's Curios. I revealed the dark secrets of her past and brought them into the present. In the process, I also wrote about the curator. He collects souls, earth, spirits, whatever is inside us that makes us unique. Ourselves. He comes for us when the time is right. And we must go with him. Sophie didn't, or she hasn't yet. She's looking for someone to take her place. Guess who? Supposedly, out of the kindness of her heart. She gave me a discounted watch for my birthday. All it cost was $50 and my blood. Drawn every hour for 12 hours. In exchange, talent flowed through my veins instead of the hardening of one's creative arteries known as writer's block. I finished my tale with 5 minutes to spare before the watch's hour hand struck 12. What did I do the next day? Try again, of course. My editor thought Sophie's Collections was a hit, worthy of headlining the Halloween issue of M. Second place, in her opinion, went to a Lovecraftian yarn called The Innsmouth Look. Third place went to It Has Wings, a tragedy from the first-person perspective of a cryptid. Hated and hunted, it sought refuge in a nearly impenetrable forest. However, greedy paranormal investigators found it, fatally wounded it, and cut off its leathery wings as a trophy. The beast bled out and, with its last breath, forgave its killers. That story made me cry. As psyched as I was about my victory, I was also worried about my new addictions. Success is a drug like cocaine or a dopamine hit from social media. The more you have, the more you crave. I craved energy drinks, high ratings, and more talent. I had to shed more blood? So be it. I figured that would save me instead of luck. That and my fast typing fingers. When you earn your salvation by the hour, however, your time will run out. I had no idea how soon. After not pushing the fateful button on my even more fateful watch for a couple of days, I was ready to get back to work. Upon finishing, we chose hell. A confession from someone in the fourth circle. I had trouble deciding what to write next. One of MM's readers liked the curator and wanted to know more about him. They said so on our website, and that comment got several likes. I hesitated. What more could I write about death that hadn't already been said? I could have had him take Sophie, but I didn't want her to go. She said that we were too much alike. That's why I'd forgiven her for not telling me about the watch's real function or our mutual benefactor. I also knew that it wasn't her time to accompany him. It was mine. On Halloween, I got up early and started catering to an appetite about a member of a cannibalistic cult who endures their highest ritual. I won't repeat it here. It's too long, with my having written it in 12 hours. It was both my masterpiece and my undoing. My fingers flew over the keyboard like never before, churning out words and sentences that sounded just right. None of them were clunky or awkward. And I made 0 typos. None. Zilch. Nada. That was a miracle in and of itself. But even more amazing was how well the story flowed from the beginning to the middle. What about the end, you ask? I never got there. You see, the process of being consumed by 12 other people takes a while, especially if they want to ensure their entree stays alive for as long as possible. As for the one being eaten, they know they're getting nearer to transcendence with every bite taken. They also know they're becoming part of their fellow members' bodies, which bestows a form of immortality upon them. The ritual guarantees some form of peaceful consciousness on the other side of the dinner platter. I'd reached the high point of the feast when I felt the sharpest pain in my wrist that I'd ever experienced. I looked at my watch, and terror filled me. The hour hand pointed straight upward. Greetings, Tenet. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't. Yet here he was, the curator in his fragile earthly form. Hiding in Eternal One. You can't be here. Please. Not yet. I cried. I sensed my visitor smiling, though he had no mouth. A familiar refrain. It's too soon. For you. But not for me. I'm almost done. Just give me 5 more minutes. And then, you are nowhere near finished. You've only reached the climax of your tale. That's just it. I have to see how it all plays out. To see it through to the end. As you have done many times before. With my help. But your time is up. I thought I heard the distant chime of a grandfather clock. Cinderella's clock. Can't you take Sophie Tathis instead? The curator made a low sound resembling a chuckle. Sophie mentioned you. Take Tenet, she said, without a moment's hesitation. I'm granting her request. But not mine? How? Why? Because you entered into a deal with me. Time in exchange for talent. Blood in exchange for time. So far, you've kept up your end. But you must still do so. Sophie and I have had our encounters at the crossroads. Her debts are paid. Yours is not. You bargain day by day. And today you did not uphold your part. I choke up. I tried. As always. Many have tried and been less successful than you. Be grateful for favors large and small. I gave you what you wanted. Now, I'm not even dead. I blurted those words before I realized the curator could fix that little problem. That presents an interesting dilemma for both of us. You see, I've guided countless spirits to and through the afterlife. I've never done that with any living being. When you come with me, you'll come in body, soul, and spirit through the realms I frequent. There are lessons you must learn before your proper time. Isn't this it? Do you want it to be? No. Then take my hand. Does yours have any open wounds? I shook my head. He stretched out his palm, revealing 6 fingers with long, pointed nails. His flesh was ashen gray and finely wrinkled. Can I at least turn my computer off? The curator inclined his formless head. His bluish-white eyes narrowed. I dashed over to my laptop and brought up Microsoft Word, which I'd minimized. The last paragraph of "catering to an appetite" stared me in the face. The feast was nearly concluded. All that remained was the division and consumption of my beating heart. My 12 brothers and sisters licked their bloodied lips in brute desire. Yet I felt something far greater: love for them and empathy for their compulsions. I knew them as intimately as I knew myself. Someday, one or more would undergo this same ritual. Would they be as brave and willing to be sacrificed? Perhaps that was the ultimate test. The point of the order of all flesh. Give what you have while you've still been given time. I hit enter, punched the caps lock key, and typed the N. It's too late. The curator gestured to my blood-infused watch, which was actually his. 12:10. Come with me. I must impose a penalty for your little trick. He grabbed my hand and pricked my palm with one of his serpentine nails. It only hurt for a fraction of a second before glacial ice filled me from the inside out. My guts froze within my rigid body, and goosebumps broke out all over me. The curator let go as soon as this sensation reached my head, giving me a massive brain freeze. Now you know how I feel. Every minute of every hour of every day. Eternity is a cold, dark thing. My lips were chapped. I knew they'd be blue if I looked in a mirror. Please release me. I cannot. I am as bound by our pact as you. We must leave immediately. And go where? To Gateway Travel, where I first learned how to guide mortals. The curator offered his hand. Against my better judgment, I took it. If my time on Earth was up, I didn't want to risk further punishment. The cozy confines of my studio apartment vanished. In their place, the brochure-decorated walls of a travel agency surrounded us. All of the offices and cubicles were empty, though it seems deserted. Indeed, Mr. Plutus, the owner, has returned home and won't be back until further notice. He took all his employees with him. I used to work here. Plutus made me quite the offer until I found a better one. I gasped. Hades runs this place? No, that's Pluto. Plutus is the mythological god of wealth. Travel costs money, not for him, or you. Good, you're beginning to understand me and my kind. He took down a brochure on the far wall, depicting a sunny meadow with a brook flowing through it and a cottage beside it. As beautiful as the image was, I couldn't quite believe it. It had probably been airbrushed. This isn't your idea of paradise? It's gorgeous, but it looks too good to be true. Perhaps somewhere closer to home would suit you. The curator led me to one of the cubicles. Unlike the others, it lacked decor, no brochures, post-it notes, calendars, or snapshots of loved ones. It occurred to me that, once upon a time, this had been his workspace. The desk was clear. He reached into the pocket of his trench coat and brought out a set of keys. He inserted one into the middle desk drawer and opened it. Several photos were inside. The top one made me cry out. My grandma's house stood tall and proud as it had been in my youth, instead of rotting and decrepit like it was now. Touch the picture, the curator said, and we'll go there. My palm shot out and slapped the photograph's glossy surface. I pressed down hard and shut my eyes tight, hoping against hope that his promise was true. When I opened them, I found myself in a heaven I could relate to. Grandma was seated in her favorite recliner, below a sampler that read, "Worry is like a rocking chair. It keeps you busy but gets you nowhere." She wasn't worried anymore. She beamed at me like it was Christmas morning. I dashed forward with my arms out to hug her. They passed right through her. "Alas," said the curator, "only her spirit is present. Her flesh is long gone. But it's okay, honey." Grandma folded her transparent hands in her transparent lap. "I'm here with you in the only form that matters." "But why are you here?" "It's a long story." I paused. Do you know my companion?" Said Grandma. "He took me in 1999. I remember like it was yesterday. I was in a hospital bed for so long. And then everything went dark. Dark and cold. I awoke to see the Savior. And he's brought me back here so I could see you. I knew you'd be here. I just didn't know when, or that you'd still be alive. Despite myself, I have to laugh. Me neither. Suddenly the doorbell rings. Could you get that, please? Grandma asks. I open the door to find my 3 aunts. My cousin who died of lung cancer. And my other grandma. My grandpas, too. One whom I'd known and loved and one who died 4 years before I was born. Hot tears roll down my cheeks. I know they won't be able to feel my hugs. However, they realize I love them just the same. I beckon their spirits into the house with open arms. Welcome, welcome. Grandma stands to greet them. Let us celebrate the arrival of one whom we love very much. She's come to see us after all this time. One of my aunts looks puzzled. Wait a minute, she's not, shush. The important thing is that she's with us for however long he allows. Grandma nods toward the curator. My late relatives give a collective shudder. He's taken all of us. But she still has a chance to learn before she passes on. Learn what? I ask. My cousin floats forward. Life is so precious, no matter how hard it may be. I know you face lots of obstacles at work and home. But you can meet them. You've been doing that every day. I'm so proud of you. We all are. I second that, says my unfamiliar grandpa. When I heard you were coming, I couldn't get here fast enough. You're one of the best things that ever happened to my son. He loves you more than life itself. I wish I could have met you. Likewise, I've heard lots of stories about you. Some funny, some sad, all good. We spend many a wonderful minute laughing, chatting, and catching up. Grandma tells me about heaven proper, with singing angels and joyous souls praising God. My familiar grandpa mentions all the conveniences of earth up there, even the telephone poles he used to climb. My aunts and cousin are delighted to report there are cats everywhere, purring and rubbing up against your legs and licking your hands if you pet them. Speaking of which, my late kitty Sasha appears among the crowd, meowing and searching for me. I try hard not to cry as I cuddle him in my lap. He rubs his head all over my hands and face, almost sticking his head in, through my mouth. When he finally jumps off, I ask Grandma if I can see the Creator and the Savior as she did. I'm sorry, she replies, but that can't happen until you've truly died. We've all had a wonderful visit, but I'm afraid it's time for you to go. I glance frantically at the curator. What if I refuse? You can't stay, my cousin says. In your current living body, you're not ready to be with us for more than this allotted time. If you insist on tarrying, we'll all disappear and return to our master. You'll remain here, alive and alone, forever. That sounds more like hell than heaven. Oh, trust me, sweetie, says Grandma. You don't want to go there. Yet I know that's what the curator has in store next. Live your life to the fullest with no regrets. Those will drive you crazy, as you've already found out. No matter what you've done or haven't done, we love you and will continue to guide you. Think well of us and remember us always. I will. Thank you for everything. I love you. Grandma gives me one more spirit hug before she fades away, as do the others. Come, says the curator. Time to move on. No, I don't want to go to hell. I know you're afraid, but 2 friends of mine are waiting for you there. I glance at my wrist and notice that the hour hand on my watch has struck 1. The walls of Gateway Travel reappear. He leads me past a receptionist's empty desk, bearing the nameplate of Rachel, then through a maze of empty cubicles. Either the air conditioner is on full blast, or the curator's continued presence makes the hairs on my arms and neck stand up straight. He leads me to an emergency exit. This is the entrance to the underworld. I must open it. Stay silent, and whatever you do, do not let go of my left hand. I clutch it tighter. With his right, he reaches toward the door and picks the lock with the nail of his index finger. The lock clicks, and the portal opens. The stench of decay hits me full in the face. I gag and hold my bile down. The curator leads me down a seemingly endless flight of stone stairs. I'm glad I'm holding his hand to keep my balance. If I slip and fall, I really will be dead. A lengthy corridor is at the bottom. I'm tired from all my physical efforts so far, and this gauntlet further exhausts me. Yet I keep pace with my guide, step by step. until we reach a vestibule lit by flaming violet torches. Two monsters await. One is a beast with the head of a wolf and the nearly naked body of a man. The other has a human head but a serpentine tail coiled neatly around his frame. I vaguely recognize them from reading Dante's Inferno in high school. "Greetings, Plutus," says the curator. "Greetings, minnows. We have a visitor. A live one." The wolf-headed creature grins with rows of razor-sharp teeth. He sniffs the air. One who doesn't have much money and never has. But also one who loves to spend. She'll be perfect for my domain. Don't you think? The snake-tailed monster shakes his head. She may have spent beyond her means in the past. But she's careful with money now. She has repented. I want her with me as a chronicler of sinners' confessions. This one pays amazing attention to detail. Minnows leans in close, and I can smell his rotten breath. "What say you?" I don't say a word. The curator told me to stay quiet. An unwise choice. What shall I show you to loosen your tongue and admit your wrongdoing? Perhaps a glimpse of the second circle, where the lustful wander a barren land buffeted by the winds of passion. Or shall I give you to Plutus in the fourth, where you'll push a massive bag of money with your chest and compete against misers in a never-ending jousting tournament? The fifth might suit you better, with your being slothful, and you'll gurgle beneath the sticks. Come, he stares with glowing green eyes that have slits in the middle. Like a snake's. Since you will not speak, I demand that you write your sins down on this parchment. Minnows says. He gestures to a chair and table with a scroll, a pot of ink, and a quill. That is the fee for entering the vestibule of hell while still living. I realize the inkpot is empty when I sit down and pick up the quill. I brace myself, then prick my palm with the pen's tip. One by one, I write down the transgressions I've committed, the inkpot filling as I work. It's agony, not least because I'm still wearing the blood-infused watch. More intense than that pain are the shame and guilt I feel as I remember each sin. Here a lie, there a carnal thought, there a succumbing to greed or envy. Hatred, too. I think I'll never finish. At last, my labors in the scroll come to an end. I give the parchment to Minnows with hands shaking so badly that I almost drop it. He reads it in a flash. "It seems to me," he says in a low, hissing voice, "that your greatest sin is not one you've documented here, but one you haven't. Pride." I gulp. "Why do you wear that timepiece? Is it not because of your vanity? Your desire for skill with the written word? As much as I hate to admit it, I do. Then you are paradoxically fortunate. Pride is such a pervasive sin that it is not punished here but in purgatory. It can be forgiven if not acted upon. However, you took it upon yourself to wager with death every day that your new talent would be sufficient to take you to the summit of your ambitions. Sadly, you have lost. That's why we're here," says the curator. "She's already been to heaven, and now it's her turn to face hell's horrors. Understandable, however, in her living form. She is neither suitable for salvation nor damnation. What a pity. She's mine," snaps Plutus. "She's still yearning for wealth and fame. Besides, you were once my employee." He reminds the curator, "A travel agent just like several others toiling at my command. I should take both of you. But I cannot." He howls and curls his clawed hands into fists. "She's mine," counters Minnows. Due to her haughtiness, her insistence on promoting her own work, she will write down others' sins and their stories forever. That would be a far more fitting punishment. "Besides, I'm above you. You forget," says the curator, "that I am her mentor and master. She belongs to me, and I say neither of you will have her. I outrank you both." Both monsters fall silent. Then Minnows speaks again, unwinding a portion of his tale. "I wish for you to witness the Lord of Darkness in his realm. The ninth circle. He is the most arrogant of all beings. His pride led him to turn against the Lord of Hosts. That is why he is also the greatest of traitors. Hold still. Well, let me show you." Minnows wraps his tail around my body 9 times. I hold tight to the curator's hand. A frozen lake stretches before me with countless souls trapped inside. Many have their bowed heads and necks above the ice, weeping for their horrific fate. Many more lie beneath it, denied the luxury of movement, their bodies contorted in untenable positions. At the center of this expanse is Satan, a 3-headed, 3-mouthed dragon. He flaps his wings, creating a constant tempest and keeping the temperature at a sub-zero level. In each of his maws, he chews a famous betrayer, Brutus, Cassius, and Judas Iscariot. I hear his voice in my mind, ringing across the ice and making my sanity crack. Wretch, I have known you ever since your birth. Now you have come to me on my turf. Your every sin is written, not only on parchment but within my boundless memory. There is no hole in this lake for you to slip into yet. However, should you let go of death's hand, I'll welcome you to Cocytus. You have betrayed God by being so prideful. Just as I have. I'm sorry. I am not. I never have been. I do not weep for myself. And neither will you. The devil raises his central head and stares right into the core of my spirit. I scream. The curator pulls me back and out of the grasp of Minnow's tail. His coils fall away from my body. I fall to my knees. Please forgive me. Lord, forgive me. He is not present here. Sneers Minnow's. Now that you've caught more than a glimpse of our Lord and Master, will you agree to my sentence instead? I can't move. I can't think. I can hardly breathe. She cannot while under my care. Says Death. My apologies. He kneels next to me. Are you ready to move on to your repentance? I barely have enough time to remember I can't speak here. I nod furiously. Farewell, friends, he tells Plutus and Minos. I hope we won't see you again. While he and I return to the surface, the two aberrations argue over whose fault it is that we're escaping. Their shouts and growls echo all the way up the stairs. With all his might, the curator yanks open the emergency exit door to gateway travel. We scramble back inside. That was close. I couldn't help but scream when Satan looked at me. I know, if you would have said one word, you would have been his. Thank you for rescuing me. You're welcome. Minos is a devious fellow. But he can't trick me. My wrist pulses in pain. I see that my watch's hour hand points at 2. Where to next? I ask the curator. He brings me to the only window inside the agency. What's the weather like? Gray and cloudy, like it's going to rain. Let me open it. Once more, he makes the lock yield with his pointed nail. Climb through. With a supreme amount of effort, pushing and pulling, I make it through the window onto a long dirt path. My protector follows me effortlessly. This way, he leads me beneath the overcast sky to yet another flight of stairs. Unlike the other one, this one's covered with muddy footprints and trails of blood. An acrid smell tells me someone's pissed here. 2. These steps are worse than the ones that lead to hell. That's because this is purgatory. Notice the bucket, bar of soap, and scrub brush over there? Here you'll wash away your sin of pride. You can't do that in hell. Because hell is for the hard of heart and mean of spirit. You told the devil you were sorry. Did you mean it? With all my heart. Prove it. Climb all the way up. Then scrub all the way down. I'll meet you here when you're done. One word of complaint and you'll have to start again. If you encounter a sinner with muddy, bloody feet, you may treat them as you will. But the mess will be the same. Farewell for now, Cinderella. As he says this last bit, I find myself in rags. With no shoes on my feet, I pick up the cleaning supplies and start climbing. The ascent takes so long that I think the curator has pulled a fast one. That these stairs actually go on forever. Besides, I let others pass me on their way up. We grit our teeth and bite our tongues, knowing that grumbling will send us straight to the bottom. I hold all my emotions in. But one thing I can't keep holding is my bladder. I, too, relieve myself on the steps, knowing I'll have to wash it off. When I finally reach the top, I sit down and take a breather. Rain begins to fall. It fills up my bucket. Time to get to work. As I scrub, I sing every song I know relating to hardship and challenge. From Sing Sweet Nightingale, from Disney's Cinderella, to Via Dolorosa, by Sandy Patty, to the opening theme of Divinity, Original Sin 2. I try, whistle while you work. But I can't whistle. I can only warble, my words swallowed by rumbling thunder. This task is grueling, but I empathize with the ones who climb. They have it much worse than I do. I cry out words of hope and encouragement, and they smile back. Their torment is lessened just a tiny bit, but it means the world to us. Even purgatory doesn't stand a chance when we cheer each other on. The final stair approaches. It's the dirtiest by far. I scour it with all my strength and even some from beyond. The curator waits. When I finish, he embraces me. Congratulations, you've completed your trial successfully. With time to spare, Huh? The grandfather clock in my watch read 2:55. 5 minutes until 3 a.m. Are we done traveling? Can I go home, please? One more vista must we explore. My home plane beyond space and time. Recite the phrase that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about death. If you would. I clear my throat. That is not dead which can eternal lie. And with strange eons even death may die. Correct. Both of us are living on borrowed time. Oh, no. How much do we have left? 1 hour. Then you must come to a decision. And it shall be everlasting. We return to the foyer of Gateway Travel. See that clock above Rachel's desk? It also reads 2:55. He takes it off the wall. Press it hard, as you did with the picture of your grandmother's house. And we'll move beyond the boundaries of time and space. The only thing that'll hold us to our current state is my watch on your wrist. Again. Do not let go of my left hand. I obey his instructions. Not only do our surroundings blur and warp, but I can't remember whether I went to heaven before or after hell and purgatory. The very concept of time is becoming more and more vague. Maybe it always has been. Strange shapes coalesce into squat buildings and spindly towers. Black stars hang overhead in a chartreuse sky. Lost spirits meander aimlessly, searching for landmarks but finding none in this labyrinthine city. As we make our way along the cobblestone streets, I hear the wandering shades mumble in a language unknown to me. Pastor Ajeb. Ihaina Ahor IB. The curator translates. Pastor is here. No one can flee. You mean the king in yellow? One of Lovecraft's great old ones? The curator nods. Oh, dear, what is this place? And why are we here? We must travel through Carcosa to the other side, where I made my decision. I wonder which one he's talking about. The choice to live on Earth. Maybe. A group of cultists in saffron yellow robes appears. I don't want to follow them. I resist with every fiber of my being, planting my feet, but the curator pulls me along. They repeat the Haster Ajeb phrase along with a new one. Ailanag Haster Limgakai. The crowd comes to Haster to hear him speak. Should we be doing this? I whisper. Aren't we walking into a trap? It's the only way. These acolytes know the location of the black jade obelisk within the furthest spire. That's what we need to reach. As terrified as I am that we'll be discovered, an instinctive part of me is curious about this sect and the eldritch horror that it worships. From what I remember of Haster, he seeks power over artists, playwrights, and storytellers. The author of The King in Yellow was reported to be possessed while writing that manuscript. Good thing I've already made my bargain. Which being is more powerful? Though, the cultists trudge along a steep incline toward one of the towers. It isn't the tallest, but it is the most oddly shaped, like the serrated edge of a saw blade. The sky above roils with yellowish-green clouds. I wonder if it'll rain here like it did in Purgatory. I'm still wearing rags, and if they get wetter, I'll be miserable indeed. Several of the lost souls I saw earlier join us. They stare straight ahead at rapt attention, like soldiers in an army. Though they don't march, they shamble and scramble as they make the climb, driven by a compulsion they don't understand. Or perhaps they do. That's even worse. Keep going, says the curator. We're almost there. The cultists pass under a vaulted archway and come up to a set of doors. I can neither see nor hear the leader, but there's a pause before they open. Perhaps one of them painted a sign in blood to let their fellow priests enter. We barely make it inside before the doors slam shut, the sound ringing in my ears. We're in some sort of vestibule, like in hell, but this one's lit by red lamps. They make the cultists' robes appear bright orange. They form a line, one after another. They approach a platform and are lifted up to another level of the tower. We take our turn without faltering. One mistake here means a fate worse than death, even for my companion, for I feel his wrinkled hand tremble in mine. We see a figure at the front of a vast throne room, an octopoid being in a hooded yellow robe. The novices bow down before him, chanting, Pastor Ajeb, in unison. We fall flat to the ground but do not follow suit. We can't. The voice of the king in yellow fills our mutual consciousness. He does not speak. He sings, and the music that comes from his faceless maw nearly drives me mad. Its notes are both higher and lower than any human has a right to hear. And the crescendos make my body shake all over. The curator seems less affected. but even he is scared. When Haster gestures for us to rise, we do so and disperse. The two of us have to get out of here as fast as possible before we're found out. We use the cultists and lost souls as camouflage, ducking and weaving among them until the curator points out an exit. We dash through it to find ourselves in a room with a high ceiling, blue-lit wall sconces, and a massive obelisk of black jade in the middle. Unfortunately, one of Haster's thralls has followed us. He raises a knife and heads straight for me. The curator reaches out and touches him. He falls over dead. When I recover from the shock of this display of power, my guide explains, "This is nephrite, the sacred gem of the outer gods and those such as myself. It is hailed as the dream stone for its spiritual properties. I first saw this monument in a dream, back when I was an agent at Gateway Travel. I read the inscriptions on it and realized that if I touched it, I could venture far beyond Earth and the universe, to locations even conventional space-time can't touch. I learned how to guide others through these instructions. I even learned how to die once I become death. That was the price I had to pay. But even I won't last forever. Strange eons are passing as we speak. My time draws near." "You mean, yes, you have a decision to make. And it is final. You not only wear my watch but bear my mark. Your body, soul, and spirit no longer pertain to the mortal world. You can either accept death and enter heaven with your late friends and loved ones or become the next curator. If you choose the latter, eventually, you must find someone else to pass the torch to. Think long and hard before you decide. Why would I take your place? I've literally been to hell and back. Mine is a work of great compassion, even when a spirit must face damnation or a long purification process. At least they will have moved on from your world. There is progress on both the higher and the lower planes of existence. Whether to keep rising or falling, I have progressed as much as I am able. Now I face my own demise. I may not have lived the best life, but I've paid for it through being the best avatar of death that I can be. Please let me sleep, dear tenant, knowing that countless spirits will be safe with you. You have willing hands and a good heart. If I die without a replacement, no one will move on. The dead themselves will rise in righteous indignation. That will doom every world, including this one. What about Sophie Taffis, the one who got me into this mess in the beginning? Funny you should ask. She died this early morning at 1 a.m. of natural causes. Her heart failed her, and her spirit passed on to purgatory. Don't worry, she'll be fine, despite everything she and her gift have put me through." I shed a few tears. "Have you come to a resolution?" the curator asks as the hour approaches 4. "I have." I take a deep breath. "If what you say is true, I'll take your place." Then touch the obelisk. "Hurry." I feel myself fading away. I press my palm to the cold black stone. Endless landscapes fill my mind. From the purple mountain majesties and fruited plain of the United States to the ancient cities of Europe to the fabled plateau of Leng. All of the beings in all of these worlds breathe a sigh of relief. Whether they be alive, dead, or some state in between, they know I'll come for them in the end to bring them rest. The curator has disappeared, leaving his fedora and trench coat behind. I put them on. My watch is still ticking. I must return to Earth. I have work to do. November is for gratitude for all the risks you've taken during the year. I've risked everything tonight to save an entity intent on claiming me. Here's hoping we'll both find peace. My family has an odd history of tragedy, at least. That's what my grandma would always say. It comes in waves. It comes when it wants to, she would ominously say. But we all knew she was superstitious and generally odd. According to my mom, who has a much strained relationship with her, she had always been eccentric. The only tragedy I vaguely remember myself is the death of my little sister Holly. Or Hole as I would always call her. I was 10 at the time and I don't recall much. My memory is like an old photograph left out in the rain, distorted, bleeding at the edges, warped in ways I don't understand. I know I was there when it happened, but when I try to reach back, the details feel wrong, shuffled, like a story someone else told me, and I just learned to repeat it. The more I try to remember, the more uncertain I become. Advertisements after the death of Hole. My mom and grandma grew even further apart. Grandma kept insisting something about her death wasn't right. She would talk about an evil presence in her worst moments. She would even go as far as throwing accusations against both me and my mom. Having eventually had enough, my mom cut all ties with her. It was the only way we could start grieving properly. She said, for 12 years we continued as a family and did our best to move on together in what had always seemed to me a haunted house that was now just a little shorter on love. A little colder and desolate. For a while, it seemed we were slowly heading in the right direction. That was until my mom started whispering to herself when she thought no one was around. It started a couple of years ago. Initially, my dad and I thought nothing of it. When we caught her from time to time, she would brush it aside. It's nice to talk to a rational person on occasion, she would chuckle. It honestly didn't seem like any reason to worry. Then one night I heard her whispering to herself from inside her bedroom. My dad and she hadn't shared a bedroom for a while at that point. I'm not a person to intrude on other people's personal space. But I heard her whispering my name. It got my attention. So, there I stood, in the dark upstairs hallway of my parents' house spying on my mom. I know it might sound weird. But here's the thing. She had been acting strangely for a while now. Distant, almost a bit hostile toward me. And I had no idea why. It seemed she might be angry at me for some unknown reason. We were never any good at actually talking to each other. The less said, the better, could have been the family motto. This felt like an opportunity I had to jump at. I put my ear to the door and listened carefully. She spoke in a low, muffled, and angry whisper. Her voice slithered through the silence. Dry and rasping, like dead leaves scraping across pavement. It was extremely hard to hear anything. But here's the gist of what I got. Julian, my name, doesn't leave, was evil, fault? I felt a cold shiver down my spine. As I stood there, my ear pressed against the door. I felt a sneeze coming on at the worst possible time. I tried to kill it but to no avail. Not long after I heard footsteps approaching the door. I jumped backward and retreated down the stairs as quickly as I could. I paused at the bottom of the stairs in the main hallway and looked up. I heard the bedroom door open. Then I saw my mom's face peeking over the stair railing. The light behind her cast her features in an unnatural shadow, stretching her eyes into dark, bottomless pits. Her mouth was slightly open, just enough to reveal the glint of teeth. For a split second, it didn't even look like her face. It looked like a mask constantly changing shape. If you've ever tried staring at your reflection in the mirror in a darkly lit room, squinting slightly, you'll know what I mean. My stomach tightened. I was sure she couldn't see me in the darkness downstairs. But then, she tilted her head, just slightly, as if she could. It seemed like her eyes were staring straight into mine. I remained motionless, afraid to move, afraid she would notice me. Finally, she retreated into the bedroom. I didn't sleep much that night. My thoughts were all over the place. Why had my mom been whispering angrily to herself about me in whole? Who was evil? I wanted to confront her, but how could I? I would have to admit to spying on her. I had to know more. And seeing no other option, I decided to keep spying on her. The only problem was, I couldn't hear her properly from outside the bedroom with the door closed. I needed to be in the room. The following nights I would hide in my mom's bedroom, under her bed. It felt wrong. It truly did. But I had to know what she was whispering to herself about. Confronting her was not an option. On the fourth night, it happened. I was lying trapped really, under the bed when the low, angry, and growling whisper began filling the room. I had never heard a whisper so full of rage before. It was a whisper stretched too thin, trembling on the edge of something far worse. The words dripped with quiet, seething fury like they were being torn from deep within her. They never mention you. They all forgot. I'm the only one who cares. The only one who ever cared. The whisper crept into the room and seemed to speak from the walls. I didn't know until then how terrifying and angry a person can sound while whispering. I couldn't believe this sound came from my mom. There's something wrong with Julian. There was always something wrong with him. I wish you could tell me how you feel. Tell me what you think. I felt an intense fear and unease mixed with sadness. Was this what my mom had always thought of me? That something was wrong with me? Why did it seem like the last sentence she spoke had been directed to someone else in the room with her? I tried to keep myself composed. I couldn't have her discover me now. Creeping under the bed, it became nearly impossible for me when a second whisper, which I knew wasn't my mom, suddenly appeared. Something must be done about Julian. He must be punished. The pitch was all wrong, high and thin, with childish undertones. It wavered between something innocent and something utterly unnatural, twisting and twitching with a jagged, broken quality that sent a shiver down my spine. To my horror, I realized that somewhere in that angry, resentful pitch were traces of Hull's voice. At first, I thought it was an echo, a trick of the mind. But then I heard it, the way she used to say my name. Julian. She never was able to pronounce the J part, but there was no warmth or innocence left in it. Just anger and something else. Hurt perhaps, or disappointment. He must be punished. Hull's whisper seemed to come from right beside me now. I covered my mouth and started sobbing. I couldn't help it, hearing Hull's voice again speaking those words. I never really believed in ghosts, demons, or any of the things my grandma seemed to believe in. Yet how could I explain this? I'll make sure he gets what he deserves. Hull. I was in a state of shock. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My mom was whispering to my dead sister, and they both seemed to hate me for some reason that completely escaped me. I know I probably wasn't always the best brother or the best son. Heck, there are a lot of things about me I don't like. But did I deserve their hatred? Their anger? Maybe I did. Suddenly the whispers stopped. I could hear my mom moving about the room. Had she heard my sobbing? For what seemed like agonizing hours I held my breath until the light was turned off and my mom went to bed. I waited until I was sure she was asleep and crept out from under the bed. As quietly as possible, I opened the door, but just as I was about to close it behind me, I heard her. Julian, is that you? I was caught. I slowly turned around. She was sitting up in the bed, bathed in darkness. I could barely see her expression, yet it seemed to be judging me. I'm sorry, Mom. I had no words, nothing to explain why I was suddenly standing there. Is everything okay? Her voice sounded tired and angry. I shifted back and forth on my feet nervously. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. It's nothing. We can talk about it tomorrow. Brilliant. I had time to come up with an excuse. Hopefully, she hadn't seen me crawl out from under her bed. It's late. Julian, you should get some sleep. I nodded. Good night. I closed the door and instantly felt a panic attack coming on. Like the fabric of my soul was being torn into. The following morning was awkward, to say the least. My mom casually asked why I had been in her bedroom the night before. And all I could muster up was, I wanted to ask you if I could borrow the car today. She sighed. I sensed she didn't believe me. Sure, honey. Just don't take too long. I need it by tonight. I nodded silently. My mom then said, looking up from her book, are you sure there's nothing else you want to talk about? You know you can always talk to me, right? Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that felt misplaced. Her gaze lingered a second too long, making my skin crawl. My dad took notice of the tension and shifted uncomfortably in his chair. No, Mom, really, I just needed to borrow the car. She held my gaze for an excruciatingly long time before she spoke. You know, you've been acting strange lately. I almost choked on my coffee. I've been acting strange lately? I felt a strong urge to confront her about everything I'd heard. About the whispers, all of it, but then I realized how insane it would have sounded. My dead sister and Mom whispering to each other. My dad would take her side. Surely, they might even send me away to some institution. Was that their goal? I felt like a moth pinned to a board under her stare, squirming under the weight of her unspoken accusations. I've been stressed lately, I said finally. I still have trouble finding a job. It wears me out a little. Her face was unreadable, but it felt like she was smirking behind her neutral gaze. Like she was taking joy in the fact that I was struggling to get my life together. Sure, I understand, but please don't feel like a failure. Everyone falls on hard times. Her voice seemed condescending, spiteful. I got up and left. I never said I felt like a failure. She sighed as I left the uncomfortable conversation behind. I retreated down the basement to my bedroom to think it all over. I couldn't risk spying on her again, but I couldn't just wait for whatever horrifying plan they had in store for me. Whatever punishment they felt I deserved. Something was very, very wrong. I felt it with every inch of my being. Just then, I thought about my grandma's warnings. I remembered how my mom had cut her off. written her off as a superstitious oddball. Considering everything, it now seemed I might do well listening to her for once. I had already gotten permission to borrow the car, so I decided to go see her. Grandma lived on the other side of town in a parcel house. Her front yard was overgrown with weeds. She had gotten too old to tend to it herself and had no one else to do it for her. I felt bad. My mom decided to cut her off, yet the rest of us followed her lead without much question. It had been years since I visited her. When I rang the bell, a sudden rush of nostalgia came over me as I heard the tune playing. Oh, when the saints go marching in. I remembered then, despite her oddities, how much I had enjoyed spending time with her before Hole died. She invited me in with a smile on her face. If she was angry with me for not visiting more, it didn't show. The state of her house was in a similar decrepit condition as her front yard. Boxes, trinkets, old souvenirs, and religious and occult objects flooded the place. The air inside was heavy, tinged with the faint metallic scent of old coins and something sour that I couldn't place. Shadows seemed to pool in the corners of her living room, too deep for the weak light to penetrate. I suddenly felt watched from the darkness. I sat, not knowing what to say, but it seemed she knew better than me. "You look tired, dear," I sighed. We exchanged a few trivial words before I mustered up the strength to ask. "You once said this family had a history of tragedy. Like some kind of curse?" She nodded. "Your mom and I never saw eye to eye on that. She wouldn't hear it. I suppose she thought I was a superstitious old hag." She chuckled, but her eyes betrayed her. "Maybe I am, but we are who we are." I looked around at the strange symbols and objects that hung on her walls. "Can you tell me about it?" Her eyes lit up as if she'd been waiting for someone to ask her. Yet she seemed worried too. "Julian, dear, is something wrong?" I paused. "I think I'm cursed. I haven't been feeling all right lately. Something is wrong." She looked at me, concerned, fearful. "It's found you, hasn't it?" she whispered, almost as if the words themselves could summon something from the shadows. I swear it felt like the whispers were now inside my head, echoing and bouncing off the walls of my skull. "You're not getting away. You're not getting away. She can't help you." They grew louder, overlapping and swirling together until they became a cacophony of taunts. Words I couldn't fully grasp burrowed into my mind like claws. I did my best to ignore it. "What is it?" Grandma sighed. "Something as old as time, I suppose. It causes trouble and tragedy wherever it goes. Breaking you down slowly. It wants to be you. Wants you to think it's you." I felt uneasy in my entire body. "I don't understand. That makes no sense." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Everyone has to find out for themselves before it's too late. It took your uncle. Before that, it took your grandfather. Even before that, accidents, deaths, tragedy." I felt more confused than ever. "Didn't my uncle take his own life?" Grandma interrupted. "It made him do it. It whispered in his ears. That's what it does. You know, it whispers when it doesn't scream. Your uncle didn't just take his own life," Grandma said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He was hollowed out. Like something had scooped out his will and left him an empty shell." I had come looking for answers, but I was left more confused than ever. "Why does it use my sister's voice? I don't understand." She looked at me with the weary weight of a lifetime's knowledge. "Only you know the answer to that. I can't help you fight it. I can't take you on this journey. I can only show you the door. It knows you, and it will use that against you. It knows your fears, your insecurities. It will take everything you love and turn it into something ugly. Once you're weak enough, it will come for you. Come to finish you off." She got up and started going through some old stuff. She found what looked like a wooden trinket, a circle with strange markings on it. She handed me the carved circle. "Wear this," she said, her voice trembling. "It will help. But remember, this can't save you. Only you can do that." I was floored. "How do you fight something like that?" She took my hand. "You know, look into yourself, and you'll know." Her touch brought me back in time. Hole was there. We were playing hide and seek in Grandma's house. It was just before Christmas, and the smell of cinnamon was everywhere. I had searched for what felt like hours. Suddenly, I heard a wailing. I followed the sound until I found her in the playhouse out in Grandma's backyard. She had accidentally locked herself inside. "You didn't find me. I thought you'd left me." I thought, And just like that, I was back in the room with Grandma. I felt tears welling up. I can't do this alone. Ever since Hole died, things have. Mom hates me. She whispers terrible things about me. Dad doesn't even seem to care enough to hate me. Grandma shook her head. You can. And you will. You're not alone. But this one thing, you must do alone. You must look into yourself as you confront it. And you must confront it. There is no escape. There is no running away. It will come for you. Again and again. Until it comes one last time. I was on the verge of giving up. I don't know how to do that. I don't even know where to begin. She gently grabbed my shoulder. You've forgotten so much, haven't you? I can't help you see it. But maybe I can show you the way. Look in your parents' attic. There's a yellow, faded box up there. Find it. Maybe it will help you remember. Help you see what you need to see. I felt defeated, hopeless, yet still determined to keep fighting. As I got up, I stopped for a moment. Grandma, what really happened between you and Mom? Why don't you talk? She looked at me. Her eyes were old and tired. We both said things we shouldn't have said. Your mom and I were very different. Dear, people handle tragedy differently. I nodded and headed for the door. Julian, dear, I stopped. Remember what I said. When I arrived back at my parents' house, the sun was still high. It was afternoon, and I knew they wouldn't be home for at least a couple of hours. I had time. My grandma had wanted me to find something in the attic. She'd been cryptic, as always, but the weight of her words stayed with me. Maybe it will help you remember. Help you see what you need to see. I found the wooden ladder tucked neatly in the closet, just where it had always been. The hatch to the attic groaned as I pulled it down, the sound carrying through the empty house. As I climbed, each step felt heavier than the last. I tried to brace myself for what I might find. The attic was unchanged, standing exactly as it had done when Hole and I used to play hide and seek here, dusty, old, and shrouded in an eerie stillness that seemed to press against my chest. The wooden beams overhead cast long shadows in the dim light filtering through the lone window. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, sounding fragile, as if they might give way at any moment. The air was thick with rot and dust, a stale, suffocating aroma that crawled into my throat and refused to leave. Look for a yellow faded box, Grandma had said. I scanned the cluttered space and spotted a pile of boxes beneath a tattered blanket. The fabric was rough and grimy, like it had been abandoned to time. My hands brushed over the rough texture as I peeled it back. And there it was, a large, faded yellow box. Scribbled on the side were the names, Julian and Holly. My stomach sank with trembling hands. I lifted the lid. The stale scent of old cardboard hit me immediately. And for a moment, I hesitated, half expecting something terrible to leap out at me. But all that greeted me were toys, faded drawings, and an old photo album. My chest loosened in relief. But the unease lingered. I sifted through the contents, each item dragging me back through memories and feelings I thought I had buried long ago. There was Leo, Hole's favorite stuffed white tiger. She'd adored him, carrying him everywhere, playing with him for hours. I'd been jealous, and because of me, Leo now wore an eye patch that my mom had lovingly sewn. His white fur was matted and gray with age, the little patch still crooked. Holding it now, I felt the sting like a knife in my side. It wasn't just a toy. It had been her joy. And I'd scarred it. Was I like that? Did I have trouble controlling my emotions? Did I take it out on Hole? I was a kid, I whispered aloud, trying to rationalize it. But the thought turned sour. Something shifted in the air. A barely perceptible sound. Whispers carried by the attic's stale breath. No excuse. The words coiled around me. Soft at first, then louder, crashing in a rising crescendo. No excuse. I shook my head, desperate to quiet them. I hummed a tune I barely remembered. A childhood melody that brought me a sliver of comfort. Beneath the toys were drawings, mine. Mostly, memories of afternoons spent with crayons and markers came flooding back. Hadn't I also drawn things for Hole? I had. I remembered. Draw me tigers, rainbows, and sunflowers, she'd say with wide eyes. And I'd oblige. For Hole. The words on the drawings said, the ones with tigers, rainbows, and sunflowers. Crudely drawn tigers played under rainbows. Wobbly sunflowers stretched tall under bright blue skies. But not all the drawings were like that. The others, the ones I'd made just for me, were different. I flipped through them, the familiar unease returning. My mom's voice echoed in my mind. So many of your drawings have ghosts in them. She wasn't wrong. I hadn't noticed it as a child. But now, staring at the crude figures, I couldn't deny it. One drawing caught my eye, a family portrait. Stick figures, all of us together, except I'd drawn myself twice. One version of me stood with the others, smiling. The second, it was scrawled in red, thick and angry, overlapping lines that slashed across the page like open wounds. The whispers came again, closer this time, always broken, always evil. I dropped the drawing, my hands trembling. What had Grandma wanted me to see? What had she hoped I'd remember? The ghosts in the drawings weren't just stick figures, they were hollow-eyed. Monstrous things. Their smiles stretched too wide, jagged mouths curling unnaturally across their faces. Why had I drawn these things? I flipped to another drawing, a grotesque scene of a monster killing a man. Below it, in a child's scrawl, I had written, "It's fun to murder." I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. Just a kid with a vivid imagination. It didn't mean anything, right? That old horror movie, the one that had given me nightmares, had probably inspired me. The one with the murderous doll, Child's Play, I think it was called. But the whispers disagreed. "You lied to yourself," they hissed. Their voices wrapped around me, overlapping in a maddening chorus that rose from every shadow in the attic. "You were always broken, dark and twisted. Poor Hole, she suffered because of you." "No," I screamed, clamping my hands over my ears. I started humming the tune Hole and I used to sing together, trying to drown out the voices. But it didn't help. They weren't coming from the attic, they were inside my head. I stood up and raised my voice to try and push them away. "I'm a good person. I would never hurt my sister." The whispers hissed at me angrily, words I could hardly deny. Evil people don't know they're evil. I dropped to my knees, lost and defeated. This couldn't be what Grandma wanted me to see. Did she set me up? Was she in on it all? Anger gnawed at my soul like rats chewing through rotting wood. "Keep going," a voice commanded, louder and sharper than the rest. It cut through the noise like a knife. I obeyed. I opened the photo album, flipping through the pages of old, faded Polaroids bleached by time. There we were, Hole and me, side by side in nearly every photo. I hadn't looked at these in years, as if seeing her face would bring back something I'd rather leave behind. She smiled at me now, from the old, faded Polaroid, one of the last taken of her and me before she died. Forever 8 years old, sitting next to me in our parents' old storage space, where we kept all the Christmas decorations, where we used to play. Her expression haunted me, something about the way she sat, slightly too far away from me, as if something had spooked her. The whispers grew louder, their words like daggers. "Yes, yes, yes, she was scared of you. Scared of you." "No," I yelled, my voice shaking as I almost slammed the album shut. But then my eyes caught another Polaroid. It was of me and Hole in our parents' garden, standing beneath 2 towering sunflowers. Our smiling faces beamed with innocent, unrestrained joy. "Draw me tall sunflowers." Her small voice echoed in my head, faint and almost drowned by the whispers. My mom once told me that, to a child, the world feels vast, mysterious, and full of adventure. Everything is new. Everything begs to be explored. A single leaf can hold an entire universe. Most of us forget what that is like. But I remember now. In our garden, Hole and I saw a jungle, our jungle. Flowers, weeds, and trees became enchanted kingdoms. We were explorers, greeting every creature like an old friend, gazing up at the sunflowers that seemed to stretch into the bright blue sky. I remember the first time Hole saw a rainbow. We were lying on the grass, rain lightly falling around us. We didn't have a care in the world, just enjoying the calmness of the moment. Her eyes lit up with wonder as she tugged on my shirt. "What is that pretty thing in the sky?" she asked and pointed. "It's a rainbow, Hole," I told her. She dragged me around the rest of the day trying to chase it down. It seemed to me that we almost caught it. On lazy summer days, we would play this game, pretending one of us was a big hungry tiger chasing the other through the garden. I remember the rush of weaving through the bushes, leaves lightly brushing against my skin, branches snapping back as I tore ahead. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the wild thrill of the chase. Behind me, Hole was gaining, her playful growls blending with the rustling of the wind. She was the tiger, fierce and relentless. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until her tiny hands finally caught my shirt, and we tumbled into the grass, breathless and laughing. The world around us nothing but sunlight, tangled limbs, and the echo of our joy. After she died, the garden changed. It looked the same but felt different, empty of something essential, occupied by something monstrous. What once was a jungle of wonder, a kaleidoscope of greens, yellows, reds, and purple bursting with life, now seemed to be a fading, lifeless version of its former self. The leaves seemed dull, their edges curling inward like clawed hands. The sunflowers loomed less like gentle giants and more like towering sentinels, guarding something sinister and forgotten. As I sat in the dim attic, the old Polaroid trembling in my hands, the dust-heavy air felt thick with memories. My fingers traced the faded edges, and suddenly, I was back in the garden, back inside a memory of the last time I ever ran through our garden, our jungle. I was 14, chasing a feeling, desperate to recapture something lost. I sprinted through the overgrown weeds and tangled bushes, my breath hitching, my pulse hammering like it used to. I imagined Hole behind me, her laughter ringing through the leaves, her playful growls close at my heels. For a fleeting moment, the magic sparked to life again. Then I heard it, branches crackling behind me, bushes being trampled through, the laughter coupled with growling. Her laughter, her growling, only it wasn't. It sounded wrong, like a deliberately bad imitation, a wailing, painful laughter devoid of joy or innocence. An angry, guttural growl. I stopped and glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw her, pale, ghostly, slightly obscured through the weeds and bushes. Her eyes, those dead, accusing eyes, stared straight at me, eyes that had closed forever and been buried years ago. I froze, paralyzed by fear, as she slowly crept out from the shadow of the bushes. She crawled on all fours like she used to, pretending to be a tiger, only this time, her movements were predatory, deliberate, menacing. Her limbs, broken and twisted as they had been the day she died, jerked unnaturally with every step, like a marionette controlled by unseen strings. The growling deepened, layered with something that didn't belong to her small frame. Her face, once so full of life, was now pale and contorted with hatred. The light that had danced in her eyes during our childhood adventures was gone, replaced by an empty, seething darkness. Her lips twisted into a wicked, unnatural smile that stretched far too wide, splitting her pale face like a gash. Jagged, dirty teeth, too many to count, filled a mouth that seemed to grow larger the longer I stared. Her bright blue eyes turned to black pits, glinting with an otherworldly hate that seemed to pierce my very soul. "Don't you want to play anymore?" Her voice was guttural, a hideous growl that rumbled from deep inside her throat. I turned and ran. I ran like I'd never done before. My chest burned, my heart pounded, but I didn't dare stop. There would be no giggling or collapsing in fits of laughter this time. If she caught me, I knew it wouldn't end with joy. Behind me, I heard her, half wailing, half growling, a rising crescendo of fury. Her voice rang out, a guttural howl that sent shivers down my spine. "It's your fault. It's all your fault. And now you leave me here alone." Her words tore through the air, sharp and ragged, like 1,000 nails scraping against bone. The sound vibrated in my skull, drilling into my thoughts. Branches whipped at my face, cutting my skin as I ran. The air around me felt thick and heavy, carrying the acrid scent of decay. My lungs burned as I gasped for breath, pushing my legs harder than I ever thought possible. The crackling of branches behind me grew louder. Her howling was closer now, and I was certain she'd catch me. I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat, raw and desperate. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a voice calling out, a lifeline. I burst out of the bushes and into the open. Strong arms wrapped around me. I thrashed wildly, convinced she'd caught me. It wasn't until I felt the familiar warmth of my mom's embrace that I realized I was safe. I buried my face in her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. She held me tightly, rubbing my back in silent comfort. What happened? She asked softly. But I couldn't possibly begin to explain. No more words were said about it. We were never good at talking in my family. As I glanced back, tears blurring my vision, I saw her, half hidden in the bushes. Her pale, ghoulish face stared at me with those empty, hateful eyes. That smile, God, that smile, was still there, carved into her face like a cruel scar. Had she always been there, watching me through the years? Through my lonely, sibling-less childhood? Always one step behind, waiting for the right moment to strike? No, this wasn't her. It couldn't be. This was something else. Something monstrous. This was the it Grandma had warned me about. How could I fight something when I didn't even know what it was? What it wanted? I know I wasn't the best brother. I know I've screwed up, then and now. I could never be like her. Perfect Holly. I wasn't there for her when she needed me most. Maybe I was even to blame for what happened to her. Is that what it wanted me to admit? Would that bring me peace? I couldn't tell where the whispers ended, and my own thoughts began. They echoed in my mind, relentless and accusing. I took the Polaroid of Hold Me, and the sunflowers. I took the drawings I'd made for her, too. I held onto the memories, of running through the bushes, of laughter, of childhood wonder. I didn't know what was coming, but I needed those memories. I needed them close. The next day after my trip to the attic, I paced around my bedroom in the basement, trying to figure out how to proceed. I could hear the whispers again, coiling around my thoughts, squeezing the clarity out of my mind. Had they always been there, just beneath the surface, waiting to be heard? Each word felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who knew something I didn't. Something is wrong with you. They hissed. Maybe they were right. Something was out to get me. I knew that much. And it was conspiring with my mom, turning her against me. My thoughts were interrupted, disturbed by her presence. Julian, did you forget to put gas in the car? I jumped up in surprise. I guess I did. Mom, could you knock before you barge in? She looked at me with a condescending expression. You wouldn't have this problem if you found your own place. You know. Her voice was sharp and desperate, as if worn down by years of frustration, but there was something else now. A strange undertone, something that didn't belong to her. I looked at her uneasily. I'm trying, things aren't. She sighed and changed the subject. Julian, did you go to the attic? I froze. I was about to lie but realized she wouldn't be asking this question if she didn't already know the answer. Yes, I was just going through some old stuff and... She interrupted me. You and Holly's old stuff. I know, you should put things back where they belong if you're going to go digging through it all. And please put the ladder back in the closet next time. My entire body tensed up. Her demeanor seemed almost threatening. Something behind her eyes glaring at me menacingly.